Yeah, what's good with y'all? Hope y'all are well. There we go. I think we're all right there. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope everybody's doing cool. Good to see. Got some folks in early. And I can see by the comments we're gonna have some information coming through tonight, which I'm glad to see. I'm gonna tell y'all up front, based on what I'm seeing, I think I'll bring people in later on the show for short stories. You got some short stories to share. Come on up and tell us, related to the topic, what you've experienced. But shout out to everybody out there. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will, so we can continue to bring you this independent Black male thought and do it that way. So Let me go ahead and get some of the preliminaries out there so you're well aware. You can donate and support the channel in a number of different ways: Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Patreon. Shout out to Dark Power for the Cash App. You know what I'm saying? So go ahead and donate so we can continue to make this, keep this moving. You can become a patron of the channel through Patreon, be a regular supporter, or let's get this right, you can actually become a member of the channel through YouTube. So just go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the join button so you can go ahead and do that. So just a couple ways you can support. Let me give you a couple more. First and foremost, let me kind of get this, man, it's out here real quick so we can do this. So let's see where we left off here. There we go. It's out, y'all. Shout out to Keith for this pick. He took a real smooth pick of my new book that is out. So I just had to share that because it was just so cool. I like how he has the instruments in the back, the chess game right to the side. I ain't mad at him. So that's what's up. Shout out to Keith for this pick. But straight up, let me go ahead and share with you the actual page so you can check it out. There's a sale going on right now, a back to school sale. So see the book right there on the Rutledge website. Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Flat Blackness, and Black Male Death. The Black Masculinist Turn by yours truly. There's an ebook, there's a hardback, and the hardback is 20% off right now. So you can go ahead and check that out. Support, if you will, so that we can get it out there and get our perspective kind of on the table. And this is all work coming out of stuff I've been doing, stuff I've been publishing, and of course the Onyx Report, the dialogues with the brothers in the room. So all our ideas in that respect are there. So check that out. Support, if you will. And we're gonna get all the preliminaries out the way. Y'all know I also do. I support another company real quick. So check this out. Right, so you can see Actively Black. Go ahead and put in Onyx Report 23 for 10% off. That's through the Onyx Report show, as you know. So check out Actively Black, company that's Black male owned. So I just wanted to get that out there and make sure we support it. So just getting a few things out on the table. It's been beginning of the week, so I'm back to teaching on campus. So I'm trying to get used to the new pace. But here we go. So some comments from Mr. 3000, some news array. I'm going to get some of y'all to come up here and share some of these stories. But I just wanted to shout out a few people real quick. What's up, Ron, Christopher, Golden Child? Shout out to Layman's Journal. Make sure y'all support the Layman's Journal channel. Golden Child, what's up? A. LaRoe, Ronan, Ramses, Dr. Thunder in the house. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. Support the Dr. Thunder channel. And check him out. Patrick, Steven, Black Pill, what's good? Golden Child, what's up? We got Heyru, we got Tommy, Big T, Jagu Archery, what's up? All right, Jamaica, LED, Brandon, what's going on? Dwayne, Brother Artisan in the house, shout out to you. Yeah, man, you're gonna have to keep me up on what's going on with Ahsoka, Artisan, because I done fell asleep on both episodes, really. I got some problems with a few things, but I don't know if I dreamed them or they actually happened in the show. So I got to rewatch that joint. If I can get to it. Rock, Had a Soul, Diverse, Patrick, Domino. What's good, y'all? So let's get to it. What are we talking about today? Well, we're dealing with this question of white collar Black women. And this was spawned off of a video that I'm going to play shortly. I'm probably going to do a couple of different responses to this, but the first one I had to respond to because a good brother of the show actually had an epic series of responses on Twitter, and I wanted to get the brother up here. And he was kind enough to join and want to have the conversation and share some of the things he put out there. So let me go ahead and welcome who should be familiar to the show. We've done several together. Brother Torraine Walker, journalist. Torraine Walker, what's good with you, man?
What's good, Dr. T. Hasan, man? It's a pleasure to be back here with you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Let me see. Can you guys hear him okay out there? Give me a 1 if you could hear him clearly. But you've been busy, brother. How you been?
I've been good, man. Just a lot going on. I've been gathering people to appear in the documentary that I'm working on. Just doing my work. I've just been putting in work, trying to like create work for our people, man, and just for our brothers, because we need it out here. There's a market out here hungry for our work and our voice. So that's what I've been on.
No, real talk. Real talk. Shout out to Queen Kalila. I see you in there. Yeah, man. And we want to support the show, or support your work before. So at the end, I'll probably tell you to, give people a way to contact you. In the meantime, I just wanted to make sure you put up everything, any, relevant projects you want people to know about. I want you to put them up in the beginning. So if there's anything else you want to share, please do so. I'm a fan. The brother's been doing legitimate journalistic work for years, as far as I'm concerned. The stuff I don't get to hear on TV, I go to Torraine and I get exactly what I need. So shout out to you, man.
Well, thank you, brother. Right now I'm just working on my project. I have a series of videos that I'm in the process of creating right now, talking about Black politics and Black males in politics. That's what it's going to be taking up most of my space all this week. I have a project that I'm not control of this one, but it's going to be on a very big platform in a very big way. I'm in the final stages of actually finalizing it right now, and I'm supposed to get the word back tomorrow. And then you'll be seeing me on places outside of the social media world. That's all I'll say right now.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we got a situation, and this is actually weird because this is the way I met you. The very first time I heard of you, I ran across your Twitter page, and you were dropping questions about whether or not you still get to be pro-Black if you hate Black men. And I said, I need to get to know that brother right there. And so you are still at it on Twitter. And I wanted to play the video that spawned all of this. And then I want to get you to kind of talk about what you saw in it, why you wanted to respond to it, so on and so forth. So let me go ahead and put it up for y'all to check out. Here we go.
Violence. Let me see. I'm going with a male. You, sir.
Here we go.
Damn. What makes me look like the type of person that would be involved in domestic violence?
All of the TV shows that I watch. You look like a male.
I look like a male?
You,
okay.
a man of color.
When you see me as
For DV!
the person of color, is there a specific race that you might see?
I do.
Okay.
I
What is
see
that?
you as a Black male.
He's South Asian.
Interesting.
Am I right about you're not a Black male. You fit the picture you present as what they show of pimps, hustlers on TV.
They, as in who?
On the main media.
So as a defense attorney, do you think that like the way you approach your clients might be through the lens of like what you might see in the media? Do you think that might be an issue?
Okay, never mind. I don't want you for the domestic violence.
Okay.
I don't think you're the person.
All right.
I'm gonna find someone else. Domestic.
Now, so now I didn't get any pre-warning before I saw the video. I didn't get any explanation of context. I saw the video, brother sent it to me, but I didn't know, what she did for a living, any of that. I just saw it as you saw it. And I wanted to share it with you the way I saw it with very little introduction. So you could get that little nugget in the middle of it that this is a defense attorney. Now you had a series of responses. What was your initial thought when you saw this?
Honestly, man, my initial thought was horror, because if this is a Black woman who is not a prosecutor but a defense attorney, and I'm pretty sure that she's had many, many Black males, for lack of a better term, fall into her hands. There's no other way to say it. And if she automatically has these preconceived ideas about people that she's supposed to defend from the system. Just comprehend how many men may have fallen to her hands and may be in the system right now because of her preconceived notions, and by the possibility that she might not have mounted the quality or level of defense that they deserved in that situation. That's what scared the hell out of me.
Right.
The second thing that occurred to me is, how was she allowed to even get that far in her profession without anybody checking her? I don't know if this is the first time that she said anything like this, but think about the mentality that you would have to go on to a show. I don't know the name of the show, but I'm pretty sure it's nationally televised, and say these things and not be fear of any censure or any sort of pushback or blowback from that. Think about that.
Right. No, that's real. I mean, we have a language for talking about, of course, people that hate Black folk. We have a language for Black folk that hate Black folk. We don't yet. Well, we do have a language for the hatred of Black men, but it's very new, and most people don't know what it is. Most people don't know what misandry is. And I conduct this test every semester. I ask my students, "Do you know what misogyny is?" Every hand goes up in the air. They know what it is. I ask, "Do you know what misandry is?" It's crickets. They don't know what that is. And if we talk about anti-Black misandry, you're talking about a new level of silence. So there's this language that we've been crafting is getting out there, but it's still very nascent. It's very new. And in that respect, there's not a lot of people that resonate with it. So when you hear this kind of, or see this kind of demonstration of hatred, and that's what it was. It is a demonstration of a very particular type of hatred of Black men that I think has been very acceptable. It's been very accepted and very normalized, not only in the larger society, but even in the Black community. Your thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right. And this is something that I think most Black men, a lot of Black boys are familiar with one way or another.
Yes.
And even though I shouldn't have to say this, I am going to preface it by saying this. The conversation that we're having doesn't mean that all Black women feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is the fact that enough Black women feel this way, who are in positions of authority and who hold the power of life and death and the future of Black men in their hands, that this is something that absolutely has to be addressed. And we don't like to talk about that because we've been taught that we're all supposed to be one family and our sisters are supposed to have our back. And traditionally, that's how it's been. But in the past 10 to 20 years, I think, especially in the last 10 years with the advent of social media, we're seeing that that's not the case in a lot of cases. And the fact that we don't have these conversations makes it even more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens regularly enough that, sometimes it throws me how smoothly it happens without pushback. I had an old friend. I don't think I've seen her in 20 years, reach out to me today on LinkedIn. And all she said was, I use your channel to share with other Black women all the resources we have available to us. And I was just like, what are you talking about? She said, well, you routinely show Black women who get resources, grants, opportunities, employment, education, things of that nature. She said, so I just tell people about, the stuff that you talk about. I said, but the reason I'm talking about those things is much of the time, those are not things that Black boys or men are offered. And there was no mention of that, right? To her, didn't matter as long as she could share what resources were available for just her and other Black women. This is a kind of subtle, backhanded misandry that plays out as well. And it's hard to put a finger on in terms of identifying how rampant it is until you experience it yourself. And I think a lot of the brothers in the comment section have a lot to share on that, and I'll let them do so a little bit later. But the subtle, all the way to the extreme. Now, you made some very, key points that I thought, I was really glad you were willing to share with us, because they dealt with how prominent this stuff is and how impactful it can be. So this is the first one I saw, and you can let me know if you want me to show another. I think there's 3 we're going to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just move this over here. Shout out to Norin. Appreciate that generous support. Thank you for that. But so is this? Yeah, here we go. So this is the video, of course, regarding domestic violence. And you said, I've been telling y'all for years how anti-Black misandry has poisoned the minds of many whackademic lowercase Black women who hold power of life and death over your loved ones. Now, before we jump in, explain whackademic, because you've been using that for a minute. It's had me on the floor because I didn't have a word for it. But walk us through that and how you came to that.
Okay. Actually, that's going to be one of the videos I'm going to be working on probably tomorrow. I came up with the term whackademics because it was my way of saying somebody who's an academic, somebody who works in the academy, but actually is whack. And what I mean by that is somebody who is supposed to be educated, but they hold some of the same racist, misandrous views of black males that some of the white supremacists who they claim to be fighting against have. The only difference is they just happen to be black women.
Absolutely.
So I call it, and I use that term because if you look on social media, you will see people who are in PhD programs. You will see people who are going into the legal field who have their JDs, people who are working in, which is even more frightening, people who are working in counseling in their LCSWs and that sort of thing, who say hateful things about black males, but there's never any censure about that, and there's barely any pushback. You haven't really seen any pushback of it until the last couple of years. And I will say I'm kind of proud of the fact that I was kind of leading that charge on social media. But that's where the whole term academics comes from, because we know as black people, the prestige that, education has in the black community.
Right.
And if you have people who have a bunch of letters behind their name and they're saying hateful things about black males, then that automatically gives credence to these ideas that they have, which aren't black ideas. They're not even black centered ideas. They're not even black feminist ideas. These came from white feminists. And the white feminist idea that all men are predators and potential dangers. That's where that comes from. And if you're feeding that back into the community, you're no good. You're basically proving Carter G. Woodson right.
And of course, wackademic doesn't have a gender, right? That can go either way. It can be black men, it can be black women.
Absolutely.
There's definitely that. But the reason I talk a lot about black women is because they are in a different position. They've been given access, even though I would argue it's somewhat nominal. But it's nonetheless, very status based. They have access to be in a position that could be useful, could be important, could be helpful, but they're also primed in a position to be very dangerous to many black men. And I think we're going to cover a couple of examples that you posted. So the first one you have up here is Texas lawyer ghosted from social media after calling black men bullet bags. You were citing examples of this, right?
That's correct. Yes. I put that up because normally what happens when I say something on social media, especially on my Twitter account, I get a bunch of people chiming in to say that I'm either lying or I'm being hateful or that sort of thing. So what I do now is I just show you examples of things that come not from my sources, but things that have already been sourced from other people. So you can't dispute that. And if you have a lawyer, and I remember that story, that was a lawyer who was licensed to practice in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're from the South and if you're from America and you're black, you know the predicament of black people in Texas. You already know what it is. And if you are a lawyer that's licensed to practice in Texas, and you feel free enough to go on your social media and call black men bullet bags, which is a hateful slur that was created by anti-black misandrists to poke fun at black men who've been killed by police, then what good are you? You're more dangerous than a white supremacist. So that's why I put that up there.
Yeah.
And she closed down her accounts. I don't know if she's licensed to practice, but most likely she just ghosted all her socials and just went quiet again, most likely.
Right. And they can come back in later and act like nothing happened, and it can continue on. Let me see here. So let me get us back to where we were. Okay. So then the next one you posted under that, the Philly judge who jailed Meek Mill has had all her criminal cases, reassigned, kicking off a legal battle. Is there anything you wanted to say on this one?
Yeah, that was the one where Meek Mill where his probation was violated back about a couple years ago because he was, I guess, riding a bike on the streets. And this is the judge that sent him back to prison that would have possibly to finish out the rest of his 12-year sentence. But because he was fortunate enough to be wealthy and he was fortunate enough to have powerful friends like Robert Kraft, they were able to get the case reviewed and he was let out. But this particular judge has a history apparently in Philly of basically dropping the hammer on brothers and sending them to prison for like years at a time on things that could be misdemeanors or could be sent to the diversionary program. So the fact that this individual black woman judge was able to have all her cases reviewed tells you that there's something seriously wrong with the way she conducted her courtroom, because that doesn't happen. Not on that level. So something's horribly wrong. Meek Mill is the case we know about. The others we will probably never know about. But just that is an indicator that something's very wrong in her court, or was.
Let's continue. Now, this one was really good. Says something alarming is happening. I've been tracking. Now, this is you were sharing this by Alex post. He says something alarming is happening. I've been tracking this around the country, and I've never seen a judge in modern U.S. history responsible for more people in jail. Judge Ramona Franklin just hit 500 people in jail at the same time solely because they can't pay cash. Talk to us a little bit about these three women here.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, these three women were part of the sort of the Black girl magic wave that happened a couple years ago. They were part of this group of Black women judges who were deemed judges in Texas. There were about 12 or 15 of them. I remember there was a picture that went out with all of them kind of in the courtroom. Yeah, and they were part of this group. And it turns out this gentleman, Alex, who I think used to work for Young Turks. He did some coalition. He works on prison reform and restorative justice and these sort of things. So he pulled their records. And yeah, this woman, Judge Ramona Franklin, has the highest number of people that she's locked up over cash bail. And if not in the state of Texas, probably in the country. These three women are a part of that group, and these are all Black women who you would think all look like the people who most likely are coming through her courtroom, because we know the most people who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder are Black men and Black women as a rule. So if they're coming through her courtroom, and if you don't have money to pay, then to the county jail you go. That's very horrific, but nobody's talking about that story. And that story went out. I think that came out about last year or towards the end of last year. It didn't make the news. Nobody talked about it. Nobody said anything. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative.
The top of it reads, on an average night last week, 6,043 people were locked in a cage at the Harris County Jail because they couldn't afford money bail, even though it is illegal to jail people solely because they're poor. This report uses jail population data provided by Harris County to compare the pretrial detention numbers of Harris County's felony judges. District courts by highest pretrial detention population from January 2nd to January 8th of 2022, right? And so it lists three judges. We have Judge Ramona Franklin with 500 people detained per night based on inability to pay. Judge Hazel B. Jones, 377 people detained per night based on inability to pay. And then lastly, Judge Nikita Harmon, 349 people detained per night based on inability to pay, right? Now there's some more at the bottom. I didn't see that. See if I can enlarge it. Oh, it's not working with me. All right. So Harris County taxpayers spent over $3.1 million on illegal pretrial detention this week. That's over twice the amount of Harris County taxpayers spent every week on public health services, public library, and population control combined. So we're looking at this question of white collar Black women in positions of authority, especially positions where they're able to leverage their power and influence and impact the lives of particularly Black men. And we're asking the question, do Black men do better or worse in these scenarios? And then you say right here, be careful, Black men, sometimes your worst enemy in that system looks just like you. And I would make the argument, how much more dangerous and powerful is it when the person who's working against you is laying right next to you?
Man, that's a very excellent question. And it's a sad question that we even have to have that conversation.
Exactly.
I would say it's dangerous for two reasons. Number one, if you have somebody who shares your skin tone and they've already condemned you and they're already feeding into narratives that say that because you're a Black man, even if you may have made a mistake, you're inherently predatory or you're inherently criminal.
Yes.
And this person already has that mentality and they're willing to feed you into the system where you will be brutalized even worse. That automatically cuts off some avenues of recourse you may have, because you can't go and say a white judge did this to me. This is a Black judge and a Black woman judge who did this to me. So if this Black woman sees this Black man as a criminal, then he must be a criminal. So let him rot. That's what I think the danger is inherent in that. Then you have to take into the fact that I think a lot of us, especially some of us who are a little bit younger, or some of us who came up in a sort of pro-Black state of mind, think if you see somebody who looks like you and somebody who shares your skin tone, that there's going to be some form of rapport that you're going to be able to have. And even though you may be in the system, there may be some mitigating circumstances that they understand. But the hard thing to understand and the hard thing to realize is that some of our so-called skin folk are not married to their culture. They're married to the system and they're married to their own opportunism. And they will more than happily throw you under the bus to further their career. If they're willing to, if it means you going to prison, so be it. If it means them cutting themselves off from their own people, so be it. They will do that. And that's a very scary thing, especially when we're talking about people who, again, have the power of life and death over your future.
And they get to mask. See, this is why these people are financed. This is why these people get opportunity and access. Fundamentally, what they get to do is be the face for white interests. I don't care if you're talking about white liberals, who have these kinds of views, but are afraid of kind of sullying their public reputation. So they support people that operate, out on their views without having to take the backlash of it. Or if you got more conservative whites that are unapologetically racist, either way, they can still use black faces to operate against the community, and most particularly black women against black men. And this dynamic we have a hard time talking about. And I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many sectors of the community I run into that do not want to talk about this, because as far as they're viewing it, the only reason you really have for talking about this is that you must hate black women, you must hate the community. Usually I hear you must hate black women, and that's enough to dismiss the conversation. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I was actually interviewed by the Final Call newspaper, right? The Nation of Islam's newspaper, and they were doing some kind of article at the time on relationships, and I don't know how they got my name, but the woman who, I don't know if she's still editing it, but she was at the time. She reached out to me. This was the person editing the entire Final Call. She reached out and we did an hour-long interview. And all I'll say is I never saw my name in print. I never saw anything from the interview used. At the end of the day, the perspective was this is dangerous, and quote unquote, what I hear a lot is it's divisive. But when you have black men responding to something that's been going on for decades, it's somehow not the thing that started it that's divisive. It's black men responding to it that seems to be divisive in these people's minds. Have you run across anything like that?
Oh, my brother, I've run across that more times than you can count.
Hmm.
There's a term that I'm pretty sure called conversation killing cliches or
Oh.
thought killing cliches.
Mm-hmm.
For the people in the audience who may not know, what that means is if someone comes out with a point of view and you respond to the point of view, instead of responding to the point of view that differs from their point of view, they will automatically start using ad hominems, or they'll start creating these monsters and try to label you as the monsters. Like the brother just said, you must hate black women, or you're not educated, or this is not what we're talking about. You're being divisive. What that does is it makes people shut down and they don't even want to engage.
Right.
But fortunately or unfortunately for me, I love to engage. I love a verbal fight. So I don't run from that. And matter of fact, I look for it sometimes. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I do. But the thing of it is, what that does sometimes is because those things are so powerful psychologically, it does shut people down, and it shuts people down who may be interested in trying to learn more, because
Mm-hmm.
they automatically assume what they heard the last person say with a thought killing cliche is the final word. And honestly, it's effective. I don't think it's as effective as it used to be, but
Mm-hmm.
it is very effective, especially if you work in academia, or if you work in media, or if you work in the legal field. And I'll tell you why, because almost every time I get on the subject, I get text messages and I get private messages from people, men and women, who work in those fields, who tell me, man, you're absolutely right with what you're doing. Y'all believe in what you're saying.
Yeah.
But all these messages are private, and I'll never put that out in public, obviously, because people trust me enough to say that.
Yes.
But I'm always thinking to myself, if I appreciate you telling me that, but why aren't you going to your institutions and telling the people who are saying these things that? Because telling me can only do so much. You're in there every day. I
Oh,
can
yeah.
only do so much from the outside. They won't do it because they're afraid. Why are
Oh,
they
yeah.
afraid? Because their livelihood is connected to that. And if you get that on your record, or if you get that on your name, that you're automatically pushing back against these things, they will
Yeah.
label you with these thought killing cliches, and that's a wrap.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I do think it's beginning to change slowly but surely, because you're starting to see more and more people push back against it, because I think a lot of people who are anti-black misandrous and just hate black men have overplayed their hand, and
Mhm.
people are fed up. You're starting to see a lot more people get more vocal about that, but we have to have more.
Yeah.
So that's my feeling about that. People have got to find their courage, and they have to be able to stand on their own.
Oh man, I am in the same boat. On a weekly basis, I get messages. I definitely get over 100, 150 messages a day at this point, across various social media. And that may be on the low side, but I will almost always get someone that under the table says, hey, I really agree with what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And they might be a fellow professor. They might be a politician. They might be a high level, entrepreneur or something of that nature. But their business is predicated not just on reputation, but specifically on targeting black women as their
Mhm.
primary group. And so a lot of those people will be real quiet, but they recognize and have experienced the same things we're talking about. Shout out to Cornelius, appreciate that, for the donation and having purchased the book. Thank you for that. And shout out to Seaside Blue, says a lot of these black women judges are married to white men. black but think like Zaddy. Okay. But no, it's something that's actually quite common. And I can tell you, when I finally, came out with my position, I had a lot of people take a huge step back from me, friends, associates, colleagues. But I started getting, at the same time that they stepped back from me, I started getting this kind of deluge of emails and phone calls and texts, messages and DMs from people to say, hey, I support, so it's an interesting exchange. I even lost family, but kind of gained at the same time. But it's a weird dynamic, and there are very few that'll stand with you toe to toe public and acknowledge and support what you're saying, because of the fear of the blowback, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And on the one hand, I get it. We all got to eat. Everybody likes to live inside. I understand that. But at the same time, you still have to, in my opinion, it's like, is it worth it to do that just to feel secure when your security can be taken from you at any time? Because you are a man and you are black, they can come for you too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like women too. There's and to be frank, there's a lot of women who don't agree with a lot of this stuff either. There's a lot of sisters who push back against that. And if you go and listen to the responses they get when they stand up or try to defend themselves or say something right, these so-called protectors of black women come at them more viciously than they do at men.
Yes.
But nobody says anything.
And the sisterhood does as well, right? And if anything, that's what I've noticed. Even with women that agree, their biggest concern is the blowback from the sisterhood and dealing with that. But it is what it is. It's going to have to happen if we're going to acknowledge it. And to me, it's like an ailment. When you go to the doctor's office, you can't fix whatever you don't know is happening. You have to first be able to diagnose the problem before we can address it. So I hear people saying, well, why are you bashing women? Well, we should be looking for solutions. Well, you wouldn't even know what solutions to look for unless we identified the problem. And let's be real. Nobody has wanted to identify black women's role in these things for generations. This is why Shahrazad Ali could say back in the 1980s, nobody wants to call attention to what black women are doing. And she was right. So we've talked about black men ad nauseum. Black men have been everything under the sun, good and bad, and much of the time bad. But nobody has wanted to identify the other side of this dynamic. And I pointed out, because often we talk about women who are reinforced by the system. I don't care if it's a judge or your girlfriend who's mad at you and calls the police just because she wants to let you know she can. I don't care which dynamic we're talking about, because they have the support of these types of institutions, the impact is dangerous. So here you are again in the same conversation. And you say there are no real corporate or institutional consequences for anti-blackness. In fact, anti-blackness in the form of misandry is the fast track to promotion and tenure, especially if you happen to be black. I'm just saying.
Yep. And it's true. And we have seen this. I'm going to go ahead, since I'm feeling it right now, I'm going to go ahead and name some names. There are people out here who worked in academia and work in media, and who work in, in the so-called anti-racist book club, that have said hateful things about black men, and they're still able to rock. Like, what's her name? Brittany Cooper, Professor Crunk, or whatever she calls herself. People like that who are able to get on TV and to get these major platforms to say that black men are predators in the community, and we can advance a little bit further if we don't have black men leading and everything. You have people like, especially, you're going to see more of this as 2024 rolls around. I talked about this a lot when every time there's an election, we get the same tropes that come out for the black community. If it's not fish fries, then it's some rapper from 1995. If it's not that, then we get pop blocking. And I'm so sick of seeing the Cupid shuffle and seeing the wobble at election events that I hate dancing at this point. But if you push back against that, and a lot of times black men do, then you get people who say black men don't need to talk. And why are people like Uncle Luke, and why are people like who the community even having a conversation? What do they contribute to the community? But my thing is, you're on TV. Why are you trying to disrespect men who are actually in their community every day, making a choice with their time or with their resources, or with just their just being mentors? That doesn't make any sense. How are you going to win anything with half your population?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And as you know, as an academic, man, you know how dangerous that is in academia, when you have young, impressionable black men and black women going into the academy, expecting to get education, expect to get edified, and the first thing they hear is your counterpart is your enemy, and you need to shun them.
Yes. Yeah, especially coming from somebody, as you say, when you point out tenure, that's key, right? We're talking about a job for life. Unless you do something extreme, you got a job for life. And in this position, you're going to be in a position to influence more people over time than not. And to be able to use that position to hawk this misogyny, I mean, this misandry dynamic is ridiculous. But this is what we're talking about. And those people get rewarded more often than not as they continue to do it. Now, you have an exchange on here that I thought was interesting, right? It appears to be, because we on Twitter. I don't know. I guess they call it. Is it X now? Is that what Twitter is?
Yeah, it's X. There's the joke that's saying they joined the nation and now his last name is X.
Oh shit. Anyway, so you had this woman on here that says to you, "Doesn't this occur with anti-black misogyny as well? I'm asking to understand." And you said, "Not to the same degree. Ain't no way in hell a black male corporate officer, healthcare worker, or professor could spread hateful rhetoric online about black women and expect to have a job by close of business day. But I've seen the reverse applauded on here hundreds of times." Talk to us about that.
Oh man. For like I said, for your audience out there, I'm on Twitter a lot, probably way more than I need to be. I need to be writing, but sometimes it's hard to stop. Every day on Twitter, you can find, like I said earlier, you can find a black woman lawyer, a black woman doctor, a black woman therapist, or a black woman PhD in some field saying something hateful about black males. And these aren't people who are hiding behind ghost accounts or hiding behind burner accounts. These are people who are using their blue check real government names to say these things.
Yes.
And nothing happens to them. Or if nothing else, if you go back and look at the likes and the comments, you will see a lot of quote unquote so-called white liberals who are applauding this and laughing at it and thinking it's a joke. Let a black man in those positions try that. By the time you hit send and you get back to your office, it's going to be a brown box sitting there waiting on you.
Oh yeah.
Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this, and you're going to be escorted out of the building.
Oh yeah.
But nobody makes the connection that people who, again, have the power of life and death in your hands. And I'm not talking about just random weirdos or just random bitter people who just are on social media saying anything just to get their vent off. I'm talking about people who literally sit behind a desk and see black people come to them every day, and depending on their determination, those people may live or die. They may be free, or they may be incarcerated, or they may come in with mental health issues and leave 10 times worse, or end up taking their own lives. That's the danger of that. And nobody says anything about it. And people have to start saying anything about it, or you're just as complicit as anybody else. That's the way I feel about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's one of the last ones that I wanted to put up here from you. You said, "I have a theory I want to run by y'all." I want you to read this one.
Okay, cool. I have a theory I want to run by y'all. A lot of academics are used to their anti-black misandry being applauded in academic and in-group echo chambers. The fact that black male studies reasserts the humanity and experiences of black men and boys in that space scares them.
True.
Yeah, that pretty much says it. Black male studies, I think, is the most important discipline to come down the pipe for black people, not just in the academy, but just in black culture, and probably since the 1960s, I think.
Absolutely.
And I want to give the backstory. I tell people this all the time. When the academy became to get desegregated, when you started seeing black students leaving HBCUs or leaving homeschooling, because that happened a lot. Black people were the first homeschoolers in America, by the way, because we didn't have a choice. When you started seeing people moving into mainstream academia, there was sort of a unified idea of black study that went into that. Those are the people like, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, even though he had passed on, but his work was moving into that. You had a lot of radical academics who were moving into the mainstream. What happened was, once Gloria Steinem and her ilk got hold of it, and after Bell Hooks and Alice Walker became the mainstream of black academic thought, a lot of that unity and a lot of that black focused academia began to get siphoned off into all these little silos. Black male studies recenters the black male experience. And what it does is give you a framework for why black men are in some of the positions they are socioeconomically and politically. Shout out to you. Shout out to brother Dr. Tommy Curry. Shout out to other brothers who are doing this work. And I think because it's starting to gain footholds, and because so much of black male studies is based in hard data and it's based in research that can't be refuted, when you start even bringing those names up, it scares the living hell of a lot of people who are based in Bell Hooks' lack of citation theory. I mean, you've seen it. Sometimes you can just say the name of Dr. Johnson or bring up the man not, and it's like pulling out a cross in front of Dracula. They either start screaming and they fly and they turn into a bat and fly off, or they completely run away. I actually did a space last year with Dr. Tommy Curry.
Mm.
He was good. He was gracious enough to give me his time. We talked for like 2 hours. I had a
Mhm.
couple of other scholars and a couple of young men in. We had about 10,000 people in the space, and we had people who disagree with Tommy Curry, but they would not come in. What they did was they created a whole separate space to talk about Dr. Tommy Curry's speech. I'm serious. I have it all recorded and everything, and I took some screenshots of it, man. It was wild. But I'm saying, instead of coming into debate and put your ideas against Dr. Curry's ideas, you want to go and do that because they know they can do that in their echo chamber and they'll get applauded, but you can't bring it to the rig dogs. It's just wild.
Oh yeah, I've seen some debates Tommy's taken part in with some black feminists in particular that were real antithetical to his position, and it did not go well. Just put it that way. It did not go well. So shout out to Dr. Tommy Curry. If you have not picked up the man knot, you are missing out and you are behind. So please make sure you do that. But I want you to continue reading what you wrote, if you wouldn't mind.
No problem.
Other post. Go ahead.
All right. Why does it scare? Why does it scare them?
This is continuing on from the last part, so I just wanted to add that. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Why does it scare them? Because of its grounding in empirical data and because it exists. Black male studies challenges the anti-black, anti-intellectual, genocidal rhetoric its distractors love. Students and the public see this, and their funders see it too. You see, many Black humanities academics will gladly ignore or pathologize Black men and boys and assist in their destruction. If tenure or or a book deal is their reward, Black male studies offers a way to heal the traumatized collective, not to demonize one half.
Get it?
Yeah. Like I said, that came about because I think last year there was a debate going on about Afro-pessimism, and there were a couple of grad students, one of whom actually is a seminary student at Princeton, by the way, who made this statement that's about some Black guy who I guess did something trivial, like didn't open a car door for his girlfriend or something like that. And she made the comment saying, abolish Black men at this point. And the way they tried to spin that was saying that we need to abolish gender to be free as a Black collective, like a lot of think tank gibberish that doesn't work in the real world. So she said this, and I found that tweet, and this is right after right before, this was about a month before the brother who got killed, who was beaten to death by those other black cops. I think it was in Memphis.
Okay.
I'm blanking on his name, Tyree Nichols.
Okay.
After he got killed. And I basically made a tweet that said, this is what abolishing Black men looks like in the real world. It's not quite as academic, is it? And she blocked me. And I said that to say this: these academic ideas, even though you could almost say they sound good in theory, but they don't even sound good in theory. But when you have a group of people who are willing to kick these ideas around, there's no such thing as a bad idea in theory. But when you try to take this out into the real world where real people live and you have to make this stuff stand up, it doesn't stand up. Right. So that's why I said that, because I feel like if you see the humanity in Black males, then you can start seeing the things that have been pushed against them, and you can start seeing some of the societal issues that have been stacked against them, and then you can start to remedy them. But if your business and if your scholarship is based on seeing them as the King Kong and seeing them as the demon, or seeing them at best as the noble savage that needs to be educated like Man Friday and Robinson Crusoe, then if you're not going to do that, because again, your livelihood depends on it, you know what I mean? The applause of your white peers depends on that. So of course they're not going to do that. And if you present that to them, they have to either shut it down or they have to ostracize it and shut it out. But fortunately, they can't shut it out, and they're not as loud as they used to be.
Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate, support the channel. Let's get the likes up, if you will. If you're enjoying this, support the channel, support Torraine Walker in terms of the work he's doing. You see the Cash App at the bottom of the screen. If you can support everything that's going on, because this is the only way this work continues, is when Black men ourselves can actually talk about ourselves and be able to do so with historical accuracy, with data, so on and so forth, as opposed to limiting our conversation to whatever is pleasing stereotypically to the casual listener who doesn't give a damn. So anyway, that aside, what I think part of the issue I have with this is that the misandry we're talking about is not only financed to the degree where people are able to sustain long careers, they're able to get these kind of momentary boosts of celebrity, even depending on who you're talking about, and who's able to build off this kind of misandric kind of culture that we've seen in media, but also in terms of how it's backed by policy. And when I say backed by policy, and this is what my book focuses on, when you have generations of policy that position our women in a position of authority, finance it, and predicate their status there on our diminished position, our diminished status, all you're going to end up generating over the next few generations are people that come to believe this. Like, for example, if we talk about the 60s and the 70s, there was a time period where, if we talk about welfare, for example, people understood, families understood that Black men often had to move out or leave. And Green Gorilla, shout out to him, covered this the other day on his channel. Black men often had to leave the state in order for the family to get resources. People understood it. They knew what it was at the time. But you fast forward to the next generation, especially Gen X. You fast forward to the next generation, and that sacrifice from poor Black folk ends up becoming deadbeat dadism. Can you talk at all about the evolution of misandry from any time period, even if it's just the last few years, whatever you're comfortable with? But have you seen any kind of evolution of misandry in your work?
Yeah, and I am going to have to go back a little bit, because we have to go to the source to get to the point where we are now. You're absolutely right. After the Moynihan Report, and also after Johnson's War on Poverty, our good white liberal friends said that, who were actually influenced by the white feminism and the Steinhams and the Coopers and people like that. Those were the people who said that the way to focus on uplifting the community was to focus on women, because the people who were advising the Johnson administration were white feminists who were at war with their men, and they felt like if they were at war with their men, then all women must be at war with their men, even though Black women and Black men have a totally different dynamic. We've always been at war with them all together. So what they did was, that those policies went out into place. And because if you have a mindset that says that men are predators, the way to uplift the community is to uplift Black women. And by uplifting Black women, we need to get that predator out of the house. So that's how you had cases in the 60s, not in the 70s, where you could not get benefits as a Black woman unless the man was out of the house. You could not get benefits because they assumed if you have a man in the house, then that man is gainfully employed, even though they didn't even take a look at the numbers that said that Black men at that time, it's bad now, but it was even worse in the 60s and 70s, where Black men were, if they had a job, it was barely a subsistence job, but they had to take odd jobs here and there.
Right.
So but just by the fact that he was a man, that he was a wage earner, so he couldn't be there. And there was a very good movie that came out, some of the old heads may remember it, called Claudine, with James Earl Jones playing a garbage man, and and Diane Carroll, who was beautiful, who had what 7 or 8 kids in a tenement in Chicago. And there's a scene in the movie where he spends the night there, and the white woman social worker knocks on the door. She has to throw his shoes at him. He has to go into the closet and hide and everything while she goes and digs into this woman's house. That was a very real thing. And so when you have 10, 15 years of that, of women having to make ends meet on their own with no male support, what that does is that creates bitterness. What that does is you take misplaced anger that should be directed at the state onto these men who are not there. Now, factor in the fact that right about the 70s and right in the late 70s, early 80s, we started seeing the rise of the bell hooks. We started seeing the Alice Walkers get prominence. We started seeing the Michelle Wallaces come out with Myth of the Black Superman. And all these books are saying that basically the core of these books are Black women could be better off if Black men would just improve. And Black women would be a whole lot better off if we got rid of these predatory men in our communities. Those books started impressing the minds of young Black women who were going into college. And that's when you started seeing the college education rate started shifting, where you saw more Black women going into college than Black men, because Black men were either through economic straits or because they didn't have mentorship that got them into college. They were either going into the streets or they were going into trades. And this is around the time when trades were being downplayed in the Black community for college education. So then you have men who feel like they're less than because they're working with their hands instead of going to get education, quote unquote. So all these things are going into play. And then
real quick, in the midst of that, we also saw deindustrialization. So those trade jobs were diminishing on top of that. So the unemployment rate, access to, because there was a time period where you saw Black men dropping out of school as early as middle school, high school, whatever, to get jobs. To be employed. And so once we get hit with deindustrialization, that begins to affect Black men's employment strategies.
You're
Go ahead.
absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right, because that was when, Pennsylvania, the mines started shutting down. Everybody knows the story of Detroit. You know what I mean? You could,
Mm,
all these jobs where, like, if even if you weren't like academically inclined, you could at least learn to work on a car. You could
mm,
learn to do construction, and you could take care of a family. I mean, we know
yes,
those stories. You could be a single earning household with the man working in a working class job and be able to take care of a house and build a house and buy a house. That the bottom dropped out of that in the 80s and 90s, as you said. So now you have a lot of men with no jobs, and you have a lot of women who are going through matriculating through the academic process, and
yes.
they're getting higher paying jobs than men. So
Hmm.
now who are they around? White women, white men,
Yep.
who are telling them that you're here, why aren't your man here? And as if they don't know. So now
Yeah.
you have a situation where they're looking down on their man, and they also are not finding mates. So who's there to comfort them in the midst of that? Terry McMillan, Alice Walker,
Right.
Bell Hooks.
Who
And then you got,
they captured the frustration, right?
yeah, and then you got to come home to that. So I'm saying all
Mhm.
that, and then I'm saying all that to say that people don't think about these things, and people don't think about these social dynamics and these economic dynamics that influence the way you think about your counterpart. So now we're like 3 generations into this now, to where you're hearing 15 and 16-year-old young girls saying some of the same rhetoric. You know what I mean? So what does that say
Mhm.
for young Black boys who are having to go out and look for partners and look for counterparts who think like this? It's
Yes,
frightening. It's really frightening. I hope
absolutely.
I didn't take you all the way around the room
No,
with that,
no,
but yeah.
not at all. That's what I wanted, because at the end of the day, having done that, you raised the question of the younger generation. What do you see in 2 generations as far as Black mating, dating, and marriage, right? Or in a generation for that matter? What do you see?
Good luck to anybody, male or female, out here trying to date.
Exactly.
That's just the only way I can say it. I'm gonna be honest with you, brother. It don't look good.
Exactly.
It's rough out here. If you are out here trying to find somebody, but let me say this: if you're seriously out here looking for somebody to have a to partner with, if you're looking for a wife, if you're looking for even a girlfriend, or on the other side, if you're a woman looking for a man to try to partner with, it's going to be rough out here, because you got so much animosity between Black men and Black women. I don't think it's as bad as social media makes it out to be, but it is rough because we don't talk to each other, we talk at each other. And you
Mhm.
got young men out here who are used to being either browbeaten or bullied, sometimes by their mothers or their primary caregivers, going out into the dating world. And they're trying to deal with women who may see them as less than, and they talk to them any kind of way, and they
Mhm.
get frustrated by that. So what would you bring to the table with somebody who automatically sees you as less than? It's going to be rough. You have a lot of women out here who are giving the message that the only way to really be successful, or the only way to be desirable, is through your body. That doesn't help anything. You have a lot of men out here who are, the messages they've been told is that the only way you can be a viable partner is if you're making X amount of money. And we already know the figures on that are really low. What is it, like maybe 10% of Black people in America are making 6 figures and up, if that. And my
That's
math may be off. I don't
mhm.
have it in front of me. So what
Yeah.
does that say about the people who just want to go to work? And what does that say about the people who are just trying to find a partner to build with, man? It's rough out here. And the messages we're getting, we don't get any kind of information from people who are just going to work and trying to live. Everything is either through entertainment, or it's through social media, or it's through sex websites. So where are we at, man? It's a mess.
Yeah. You got males who are taught that their worth is strictly based on how much they earn. You got females that are taught that they can control men as long as they have vagina. I mean, that's the idea, right? She's beautiful as long as she's beautiful, as long as you want to be in her space. As one person put it in a meme that was recently sent to me, she somehow owed a check from men simply on the basis of that. But back to the question of misandry, one of the things that I'm focused on is you have your academic feminists, right? And they've been normalizing this extreme misandry in college classes for decades. I mean, and for many of us, if you're going through graduate school, a lot of this shit is required reading. And that's the thing that I always thought was a trip when they blew up at people like, Kevin Samuels or the Manosphere itself. People were hot and frustrated about it. And I said, you want to see frustrated? Make your master's degree require that you go through the Manosphere and absorb many of these people. If you think you're upset now at what the Manosphere is saying, pay for it in graduate school, and where it's required listening, required reading, and then tell me how frustrated you are. That's what the experience has been for a lot of Black men who've had to go through graduate school, especially in the humanities, and have had to
Yeah.
take in this kind of misandry on a regular basis and have it treated as viable and accurate scholarship. That's already a problem. But I'm also interested in looking at everyday misandry, the kind of misandry that we just accept. And it's not necessarily academically based, but it's present nevertheless. And I think one of the clearest examples we've seen recently is Terrence Bud Crawford. and the relationship between he and his mother, right? And the kind of notion where he has a father that's saying this boy is going to be a champ while he's still a baby, and the mother's response is he ain't going to be shit. The thing about it is, it's not just that she said it as his mother that bothered so many people in the last few weeks. It's because so many Black men can resonate with hearing that they aren't going to be shit, whether it was from mothers, girlfriends, colleagues, wives. You know, Black men can speak to hearing that language from a young age to adulthood, regardless of how successful they may have been. At any point in time, there's still base assumption underneath all of that is you're not worth it. You're not humane. You're not human in the sense that we should value you. You are not shit, as they say. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah. Again, because I love history. I think you and me and other brothers around our age remember Boys in the Hood.
Mm-hmm.
When was the first time we saw Doughboy as a young boy?
Oh yeah.
When Trey was going to his house to go get him out there so they can go play ball, and you could hear his mama through the door telling him, "You ain't shit. You ain't nothing. All you do is sit here and eat, sleep, and shit. You just a fat piece of shit." You know what I mean? That is a very common thing. You know, either
I heard it myself. Yes.
Yeah, man. And what was she doing? Taking out her frustration because his father wasn't there on her son. But on the other side, she was treating her son, who had a future in her mind, who was going to the pros, like a god. You know what I mean? Which creates animosity in children, and that happens a lot, brother. And to your point, though, just to get back on track, people don't understand the stressors that Black males have to deal with from the people who sometimes give us life and are supposed to give us love. And there are a history of Black men who have the same sort of story as Terrence Crawford. His story is not a unique story, unfortunately, man. I've heard a lot of brothers, and I've seen that in some people in my own family, where you have brothers who are looking for love and looking for support, who may be going through a situation. You know what I mean? And the people who are talking to them are their mothers or their caregivers or their godmothers, telling you you're going to figure it out the best way you can, if at best, or telling them you're just sorry and that's your fault. Just figure it out. You ain't shit. What does that do to a young boy? What does that do to his self-esteem? What does that do to his self-worth when he doesn't have the skills, or he doesn't have the way to articulate what he's feeling and the pain he's feeling, and the person he's depending on to survive in a way is telling him this stuff? What's going to happen with that? And we don't like to talk about that because, going back to, like I said earlier, we have this idea that the mother is the caregiver, and most of us have only had our mother to take care of us. So we don't want to really talk about that. And I think you can extrapolate that to the larger Black community. We assume the mother is supposed to be nurturing and we're supposed to defend her. But what do we do when our mothers don't defend us? What does that do? And why won't we why won't we have that conversation? I think things have reached critical mass to the point where we're going to have that conversation, and we can't hide it anymore because it's getting too blatant. You know, one of the blessings and the curse of social media is that everything that's going on is out on Front Street, and we can't hide the stuff anymore because it's getting too out of control.
Exactly. Very much out of control. And the fact that it's been acceptable for so long, you're actually starting to see people pause. You're actually starting to see people withdraw and apologize to some extent. But I think that's only because of the work people like yourself, myself, and others are doing to actually call this out. Because the reality of it is, until something has a language, until we can explain it and we can study it and understand it, often it'll just go by without any reflection. Right? This is part of the issue. But once you're actually able to name something, articulate it, look at its patterns, study its nature, then it becomes something apparent. And I think we've done this work in this last number of years to really push out there, especially to Black men, that this is what's going on. And it needs to be called into question. You know, and this is one of the reasons I'm such a big supporter of your work, because you're doing this in a journalistic lane. I have not seen a lot of people going that route. So I really do appreciate that, because it needs to happen in so many different areas, right? So we're just putting out or at least on this show, we aim to put out the language on a regular basis, but it's up to people who are picking this up to apply it to whatever space you're in and create lanes where we can actually begin to funnel some of these brothers through with an understanding of what's been working against us. Because it's one thing to deal with white society. It's another thing when agents of white society who are laying right next to you are working for your demise. We don't know how to do that. I don't care if you're talking about hardcore revolutionary nationalists, we do not know how to do that with the woman that we've been with. It doesn't. We don't know how to equate. We can picture white society. We can picture cops. We can picture racists. We can even picture Uncle Toms, but we don't know how to do it when it comes to women. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to make another point too. Some of these conversations, even though we're talking about Black males, they're not unique to Black males. And I'm gonna say that to say this. I used to work in corporate America. I've been talking about, I haven't talked about it this much, but I've been talking about it a little bit more in some of the conversations I have.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in corporate America for a Fortune 500 company for about 7 years. I used to travel with a lot of, I was one of the only 2 Black men in my department where I was in, and I would travel for like business trips and everything. We go to different cities and everything, but be me and my white counterparts, obviously. And there's a thing that happens when you're on a business trip and you're in a hotel and all you guys are sitting around in suits and the drinks start flowing. You start listening to everybody's conversations.
Mm.
I'm gonna tell you this, and I'm gonna tell some of the people who are watching. If you want to see some real toxicity and some real toxic masculinity, hang around some wealthy hang around some wealthy white guys when they
Mm.
start drinking in these hotels. They talk about their women like dogs.
Mm.
I'm talking about bad.
Mm.
There's a movie people should watch called American Psycho. A
Mm.
lot of the scenes are set with these guys who work in Wall Street in the 80s, and there's a lot of scenes where they're sitting around in bars and everything before they go to the trading
I
floor.
remember that movie.
And
Yeah.
and the stuff they show in that movie is a tame version of some of the things these guys say. And I'm
Mm.
saying that to say that other cultures have these issues, but what do they talk about it? At home. Where do we talk about it? Online. Where do we talk about it? In the classroom. And that's why some of these things are as bad as they are. That doesn't mean that it's not valid. I'm just saying that what we're dealing with, because we're Black, and the lowest common denominator and the worst things about us get put on blast because society and American society loves that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But what we have to do is we have to find the courage to be able to talk about these things, to talk about the things that are wrong with some of our sisters in public. And we have to be able to challenge people who are saying hateful things about Black men, because if we don't, the larger society is going to keep encouraging this, and they're going
Yes.
to keep encouraging this without blowback. I would even go so far as to say what we need to start doing is we need to start doing emails, and need to doing phone calls the same way other populations do when they get slandered. If you
Mm.
say something about someone of the Jewish faith, if you say something about somebody
Yes.
who's LGBTQ, if you
Yeah.
say something about somebody who's Asian, trust and believe those people in the organization are going to be on the phone, and they're going to be standing outside your door, and they're going to be sending emails to the people who hire you. We
Yep.
got to start doing likewise, if it's our sisters or not, because at that point they're not our sisters anymore. They're on the side of the enemy.
Well, this is what we're looking at. I'm going to show a couple of examples, and these were pulled off my Facebook from the last couple days, I want to say. I want to pull them up and the reason I'm doing it that way is I'm trying to show you how prevalent some of these things are, in that I can pull it off my page just from the last couple days. I'm going to show a couple examples, but at the same time, what I want to do is put out the link in the comments, and I'm going to put it out for 2 separate groups. So in one vein, we have my regulars. So if any of my regular brothers who are friends of the show want to come up, I don't care who it is, Dr. Thunder, BGS, Gigi, Dr. Neil, who was in the comments section, Dr. Dunbar, if any of my regulars want to come through, I don't know if Officer Charles is in there, but the regulars can come through, come on up. And if I don't know you, but you do have a story relevant to this, we're talking really about white collar Black women in positions of authority who are able to influence and use their influence in a way that generally works against Black men. If you want to come up and share a quick story, you're able to pop in, do so. And I'm gonna bring you up to tell your story, bring you back down, and let the next one come in. So those are the 2 groups that can come up. The link is in the chat, so take advantage of that. In the meantime, I'm going to pull up a couple of things that popped up in my stream on Facebook, things that were shared with me, just so we can kind of see how some of this can be used. Now, this one is a couple years old, but it was something that was sent very recently. I think some people were just getting a hold of this. So you can see this in Daily Mail, right? Married math teacher and mom, 27, lowered her student's grade because the 17-year-old boy stopped having sex with her. Now, as a journalist, I'm just curious, is having sex with her, is that how that works? Is that the term used when men engage in this behavior with female students?
Absolutely not. That is called rape, or it's called sexual assault.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because I noticed for a lot of these kind of articles, having sex with is a term they use quite a bit, right? So you can see a couple points about here. South Carolina teacher Jennifer Olagier Arrow, I know I've butchered that, was arrested in December, accused of coercing a 17-year-old student into having sex with her. She's married to a medical resident, and the pair have a young baby. Math teacher and high school tennis coach allegedly had intercourse with her student at school At her home and in her car, one of the alleged sexual encounters took place in the presence of her then 10-month-old baby. When the teen
Jesus Christ.
rejected her sexual advances, she lowered his grade from an A to a B. Right? Boy and his mother are suing the Charleston County School District for negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And again, if you go to Dr. Tommy Curry and Ebony Utley's paper, She Touched Me, what you'll find is that when it comes to sexual violation in regard to boys, statistically, or not statistically, in terms of the data, the damage done emotionally isn't very much different from what happens to girls who are violated underage. But somehow we have this impression that when boys are violated, they're all good with it because they got to have some kind of sex. When girls are violated, it's the end of the world. When actually what the data shows is it's quite even in terms of impact. And when you're dealing with a much older woman, in this case, she's in her 20s, but the reality is when you're dealing with an older woman, especially as a young man, often you are not prepared for the kinds of emotional games, the types of manipulation that can take place. And if you doubt me, picture yourself dating a 16-year-old girl and tell me what kind of circles you could run around her. So just wanted to put some of that in some degree of context. But again, I'm just pulling at random, just a couple things at random. I have another here. And this one I think is more recent. Matter of fact, I think, I was just sent this one today. So this is dated August 24th, right? This is today, 2023. Teacher allegedly groomed 8th grader with accidental nude photos, repeatedly sexually assaulted him, then brought him a gun he picked out, detailed in over 2,200 text messages.
Wow. Man.
These are well-to-do, respectable positions. Both of these examples are teachers, but you have the violation of Black boys in particular, right? And so I just kind of want to put this up. And I remember people used to tell me when it came to teachers, because there was a whole slew of white women that were kind of being outed, and I remember people would say, "Well, Black women don't do that." I was like, "Really?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. I think the issue was we never inquired, because we assumed that they didn't. When we started to see more and more reports, then people treated it like, oh, this must be a new thing. No, you can go to Iceberg Slim. He was talking about, this happening to him when he was a young boy.
Yep. And we've had how many rappers have come out like Wayne and other people who've said that they had their first experience when they were like 12 or 13 with women who were 30 and stuff like that.
Yes, sir. Even down to Tyler Perry. Yes.
Yeah. But here's the thing about that. People don't, what's wild to me is the cognitive dissonance that happens in a lot of these conversations, because people talk about some of the behaviors that some Black men exhibit when it comes to Black women, but they don't examine the fact that some of this may be stemming from the fact that they may have been abused by women who look like them when they were in their teens or when they were younger and everything. That's fair. But no, these are people who are supposed to be intelligent, right? They're supposed to be academics, but they can't put two and two together.
Yes. Shout out to the Mad Professor. How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
Doing all right, good brother.
Good.
Glad to hear you.
Good to be here with you all. I'm happy that you all are having this conversation. I mean, as usual, putting in work on a Thursday night.
I think we're getting some background in there. I don't know if something's playing, Doc.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Is it
Yeah, it's clear. I'm gonna read through a little bit of this article, and then I want to get both of you to comment on it. So it says the now former private school teacher in Wisconsin allegedly had sex with one of her 8th grade students and then gave him a gun for his 14th birthday before he ran away from home, authorities said. Taisha Bolden, 34, stands accused of 1 count each of child sexual assault in the 2nd degree and intentionally selling a dangerous weapon to a child, according to Milwaukee County court records reviewed by Law and Crime. She was arrested on August 18th and posted $2,500 bond the next day on the condition that she have no contact with any child under age 16 without supervision. Now, I'm curious that when men are arrested for that, do they get out for $2,500? I'm just curious. But
you don't get out.
Oh, okay.
And you may not make it out of the holding cell once they found out what you're in there for.
And you see that? Black men who are locked up with you, men who are locked up, and Black men in particular, you might lose your life because of that. But anyway, So I'm actually going to start with Dr. Neal on this one. Give me your thoughts about what you're seeing and what we're talking about today, Doc.
Yeah, man. I just wanted to say, man, James Foreman Jr., who's the son of James Foreman, who led the Congress of Racial Equality in the 60s. He's a law professor and a former lawyer, defense attorney. He worked in the public defender realm, and he wrote a book that won a Pulitzer Prize some years ago. It's called "Locking Up Our Own." And the book deals primarily with everything that you all have been talking about. Just the idea that simply because you have Black faces in positions of power, particularly in the criminal justice system, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get better treatment from them over against their white counterparts. And in fact, the data shows that depending on where you are, and he worked in DC, he worked in the DMV area and everything like that. Depending on where you're located, your treatment can be harsher than what you would receive under someone who is not a Black individual. And I think that what he wrote really speaks to everything that you're talking about. I think we have to. It's already been acknowledged right here. I mean, there are powerful white interests at play, and you have individuals who work in the arena of criminal justice who are careerists. A lot of these people, if they're district attorneys or what have you, if they're judges, they're often in their positions as a result of elections, and they seek to curry favor with the higher ups. Some might have higher aspirations. As we talk right now, Fannie Willis out in Georgia, where Torraine Walker, has become quite prominent and in public in terms of the people who she's prosecuting. One big case there is with the rappers associated with Young Thug and his crew, Young Slime Life and everything. And now, of course, she's prosecuting Donald Trump. But it seems to me it's not far-fetched to think that this is an individual who has high aspirations. She might want to run for mayor of Atlanta. She might want to become governor. She might, just want to, go higher and higher. You never know. But one thing that's clear is that it doesn't matter whose side she's on, because both liberals to the right people have demonstrated that they have a consensus when it comes down to law and order and Black men. And the other example, of course, is Kamala Harris. And even though she some question how Black she is in terms of lineage and everything like that, she identifies herself as a Black woman. She is regarded as a Black woman, treated as a Black woman, so on and so forth. And when you look at her record in California, San Francisco in particular, district attorney, attorney general, so on and so forth. And in fact, I have a whole chapter that deals with all this stuff coming out in my book. It is clear that the interests of the white ruling class are at the center of how these people operate. These are people who are unwilling to take any type of risk professionally or otherwise. And Black people, Black men in particular, they're just disposable.
Yeah.
And just seen as sacrificial lambs that are useful for elevating interest and the like. And so that's why this whole idea, they've been for a few years now talking about the idea of a progressive prosecutor or what have you. In my mind, there's no such thing as a progressive prosecutor. You only have, what you have is kind of a selective type of progressivism, as in this case right here with this young woman who seemingly is treated very softly by the criminal justice system in relationship to this act of sexual misconduct. So there is a selective way in which they apply the law in seemingly progressive terms, but it is not across the board. Because we know that, again, if you change the genders and you put a man in that situation, there would be no bond. There would be a real swift negative reaction to what this individual had done. There would be more written about the case, more said, but it's clear that there is there's clearly a double standard that is there. And what's going on, as you all have noted, what's going on in the criminal system extends beyond that. You know what I mean? And it's clear we have professionals who are invested in in reproducing the system as it is. Cornel West. I'm gonna stop in a second. Cornel West. He's running for president and everything, and he said something recently that I saw in the video, and it pertained to academia. And one thing he said, what's the use of you having Black people in academia who are not going to create anything or pioneer anything that is different from what has already been established. He said there's no point in having Black people with PhDs in humanities and social sciences who are simply just going to reproduce the system as it is. And the expectation and there is the expectation that you reproduce what is already there. And if you're going to be ethical, and he uses the term prophetic or what have you, you can't live with the demand that you reproduce the system. You come with a different set of experiences, a different set of eyeballs or lenses and what have you, and it just makes sense, kind of naturally, that you do something different, that you depart, that you dissent, you diverge from the consensus.
Right. Appreciate that, Doc. Let's go ahead and welcome Green Gorilla G with the PhD in the house.
What's going on, man? How are you gentlemen doing today?
All right.
Oh, good, brother. How you?
Man, I just got off a stream 3 hours long, man. And so I'm coming to chop it up with y'all on this one, though. What's good, man? Somebody said Dr. Johnson's trying to get you on the panel or something like that. I said, man, let me go ahead and holler at Dr. Johnson, man. I was cracking.
Y'all, all three of y'all know you got a home here. You don't even have to ask. But we were talking about a number of things. I wanted to get Torraine's response to the last article, and then I'm gonna bring Gigi in because we're the larger subject is white collar Black women and the impact they have on Black men using positions they've often attained, a position of authority. But as it relates to the last article or anything Dr. Neal said, anything you want to respond to, Torraine?
Yeah, like I said earlier, man, it's first of all that article and that story is horrific. First off, but there seems to be this idea in the Black community that black women can do no wrong. And I think that definitely does a disservice to Black men, because a lot of times Black men who fall into the hands of women who mean us harm are going to have horrible life outcomes. But that also does a disservice to Black women, because what that does is that doesn't give you any opportunity to self-reflect when you can use a blanket statement and say that Black women are perfect and Black women can do no wrong. That doesn't give you any kind of opportunity to say, well, damn, maybe I need to check some of my behaviors and maybe I need to think about some of my prejudices. Like in the video that started this conversation, you have a defense attorney who is assuming that a Black male, or just who she assumes is a Black male, is a criminal or guilty of domestic violence just because he has brown skin and he's a little bit big. You know what I mean? What does that say when she gets checked on that and she kind of automatically brushes it off and wants to giggle and move on to the next thing? Right. What does that do to a Black man who maybe had to rely on her for defense, and he's trying to give her information and she's brushing that off and the judge is asking questions and brushing things off? I think it's horrific, man. And I think until people in these fields begin to get more vocal about that, you're going to see this pattern repeat itself, and it's going to get more and more worse, whether it's in the office, whether it's in the legal field, whether it's in any field. Because if you have the ear of the people who have real power in your office and you're not advocating for them, and if you try to advocate for yourself, you have somebody running interference for the power structure to tell you to shut up, you're lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me real quick shout out a number of cash apps that came through. Mujahid, appreciate that. We got Delbert, we got Greg, we got SL and Expansion Wiring. Appreciate that support, y'all. What I want to do is, since it's a short clip, I think I'm going to replay the initial video that spawned this discussion, and I want to get Green Gorilla to kind of weigh in on his thoughts, on that. So let me go ahead and pull this up.
Violence. Let me see. I'm going with a male user.
Here we go.
Damn. What makes me look like the type of person that would be involved in domestic violence?
All of the TV shows that I watch. You look like a male.
I look like a male?
You,
Okay.
a man of color.
When you see me as
For DV!
the person of color, is there a specific race that you might see?
I do.
Okay.
I
What is
see
that?
you as a black male.
He's South Asian.
Interesting.
Am I right about you're not a black male. You fit the picture you present as what they show of pimps, hustlers on TV.
They, as in who?
On the main media.
So as a defense attorney, do you think that like the way you approach your clients might be through the lens of like what you might see in the media? Do you think that might be an issue?
Okay, never mind. I don't want you for the domestic violence.
Okay.
I don't think you're the person.
All right.
I'm gonna find someone else.
Right. Gigi, any thoughts, brother?
I mean, from what I just saw, I mean, I assume that this is some sort of thought experiment that they're engaging in order to try to figure out like who's the guilty person or whatever the case may be. But that black woman is a defense attorney, correct? I assume, right?
Right.
Man, if she's a defense attorney and that's the kind of mindset she has, I mean, like what's in this? She's just been indoctrinated with the stereotypes about black men, which, ultimately, depict us as Mr. from The Color Purple, or depict us as sexist, grapers, and abusers. And that, is the catalog of our humanity. And I think that that's just erroneous. It doesn't match up with the empirical data or the facts about who we are and, what the catalog of our experiences are. But I mean, that's just how we get depicted. We get stereotyped. But to see a black woman who might be a mother, who might be a sister to a black man, who might, for all intents and purposes, be the daughter of a black man, to hear that this is what she thinks about black men in general, it's alarming. But, that's how we get talked about. That's how we get treated.
Yeah. Torraine earlier through Twitter was showing us a number of different things in terms of lawyers and judges, and specifically how they've actually treated people in their courts, most particularly black men. But then we started to talk about white collar positions in general. So professors, school teachers, things of that nature, white collar positions where you do have people in some degree of authority, and they're able to implement their will on the fate of many a black man. Dr. Neal, any thoughts about that or the video or anything else?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I wanted to say, man, is that you have to indict higher education, man, and you really have to indict the schools of education. You have to indict the law schools. You have to indict the sociology departments, women's studies, et cetera, et cetera. You really have to put your finger on what is going on in these universities, in these classrooms. Especially law schools, man. I mentioned James Foreman Jr. There's another brother, another black man who teaches at Georgetown. His name is Paul Butler. He has a book called Chokehold, and he's a former federal prosecutor. And he's one of these guys. He wrote a book that's supposed to be sympathetic towards black men, but he really comes off of just extraordinarily punitive towards black men. He's an intersectional feminist. Tommy Curry has written about his stuff, what have you. You know what I mean? And so what was clear to me in looking at this stuff, so I'm like, this stuff is happening in these law schools, man. They're producing prosecutors, they're producing, or let me say this, future prosecutors, future defense attorneys, they're producing future judges, future, elites that might go into politics and what have you, who are imbued with these horrible ideas, And I think you really have to go, at the heart of what is happening. So higher education for me, is the big thing. The other part of it has to do with social class, and that is that we have an element. We have a population of Black people right now who are in the middle to the upper middle class, who are in higher education, who are in these graduate schools, who have gone to all white schools, they have gone to relatively mixed schools and what have you, and their core experiences are primarily with white people, okay? And these people are the ones I've seen who are most aggressively espousing these deeply anti-Black misandrous notions. They become professionals and what have you. So the the woman right there, listening to her talk, and she was stereotyping this man. My mind was blown because I'm thinking, is this scripted? Is this real? Is this just something that they're playing out? Okay.
Right.
But let's just say that this is real. Okay. I want to know what her background is. I want to know what her class background is. I want to know what real proximity that this individual has actually had in relationship to Black men, or is she just one of these Black women who've been surrounded by white people all of her lives, been surrounded by upper middle class people all of her lives, and has consumed all of these notions from bourgeois, ultra bourgeois, white feminism, and just projects this stuff on Black men uncritically.
Yeah, I would assume so.
We're actually doing a little bit of research to find out exactly who that was and try to do some digging. Actually,
but my viewpoint on it is that I would just want to piggyback on what Dr. Neal was saying. The Academy bears some responsibility for this, and also the political left for picking up what the Academy has been promoting for the past, I don't know what. I think Mapping the Margins from Kimberly Crenshaw was published when? 89 or 91, one of those years. Because she wrote two articles. One was, I think, written in 89. The other one was written in 91. But, I mean, ultimately, in my viewpoint, the way it's posed, if you read Mapping the Margins, it's just like the title of it is Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity, Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color. And if you look at the article, I mean, ultimately what it is, it's an apology for the utilization and the expansion of the carceral state under the frame that Black women are unjustly and arbitrarily subjected to male dominance via violence and sexual assault. I'm trying to avoid using that word. And it basically outlines the ways that Black and immigrant women are overlooked and undersupported as they are subjected to domestic violence and sexual assault, whereas white women are not undersupported. So it's like a Me Too kind of a movement prior to the Me Too movement actually getting off the ground.
Right.
And in my viewpoint, and I've said this elsewhere, conceptually, it's connected to dominance feminism, like this kind and the sort pushed forth by Ellen Pence, Andrea Dworkin, Catherine McKinnon. But, I'm name dropping, but these women are dominance feminists, and they believe that the source of violence amongst men and women, especially who cohabitate or involved in intimate partners, is just the man wants to dominate the woman, and he does so by his imposition of his physical power over her. So it begins with the false white feminist premise that when women are subjected to violence, it's because the men they are involved with, they just want to have power and control over them.
Yeah,
and
that's the primary reason. That's it.
Yeah, that's the ideology, right? And to them, this premise is substantiated by women's experiences, and the self-evident truth of the patriarchy theory, which of course emanates from standpoint epistemology, which I think is an abysmal kind of epistemological framework. But the establishment of a theory, though, and this is why I think, Curry is important, and other, scholars who are coming, and piggybacking on his, is that, the social scientific literature on DV is a little bit different than what the dominant feminists say it is. Okay, and I just want to make it clear: women are subjected to violence from men, but the converse is also true, right? That women, also engage in violent actions towards their partners, and they also sexually assault men and boys as well. So, but we can't talk about that because, over the past, I don't know how many, 60 years, all we've heard is like the catalog of men's deficits related to morality, their regressiveness related to their own masculinity. And so, this narrative is what's permeated the academy and politics in general. And I do take umbrage with it,
Absolutely.
It needs to be challenged. And today people are beginning to challenge it, but the challenging is not really taking place in an accelerated rate, which is what would need to happen if we, to seriously kind of roll it back. But
Right.
Well, let me ask y'all something real quick, because we got all three of you brothers here, and you're all in the academy. I feel like, and I told Dr. Johnson this a while ago, I feel like some of these things are able to permeate because a lot of brothers and sisters who work in the academy are either afraid to push back, and I'm not either afraid to push back against it, or there's no framework to organize to push back against some of this stuff. So I want to ask all three of you brothers, what can be done inside the academy, if anything, to kind of move the needle away from some of this rhetoric and some of these theories into some things that can really benefit Black men, or at least get some things on record to stop some of this?
Yeah. Well, the what we're doing, what Dr. Johnson has done, and what Dr. Curry has done, Gigi and myself, and others, right now, that's the dominant way. I would say the most impactful way to do it. That is to take the risk. There's no way around risk taking. There's no way around contesting these theories. There's no way around it. There's no way for you to propose alternative models or what have you without going against the grain. And and people who are interested, who are already in graduate programs, or who even teaching, assistant professors or what have you, they have to make their decision within themselves, and they have to ask themselves professionally, is it worth you being quiet? Is it worth you being subject to what LeBron James was told by Laura Ingraham? Shut up and dribble. You're going to spend the rest of your life, under that demand, okay? Or are you going to speak? You know what I mean? You've got this. You're in a position of privilege. It is a position of class privilege in particular. And if you really, really care about this condition, and you really want to, have a meaningful impact with your work, you've got to count the cost, man. There is no way around it. So it depends on the individual. And what their philosophy of scholarship is. Here's the thing, and we have to be just clear about it. It's just a lot of us who go into these areas in the humanities, social sciences, in law, or what have you. We're careerists, and we want a paycheck. We want a good living. We want to be able to afford a house, drive well, travel, do all sorts of things, and we will look the other way. It's kind of like, just to go back in the past, man, when you look at Tuskegee and you look at what happened over a 40-year period, you have to acknowledge, there's no way to get around it, that Black professionals were complicit with the government, and what the government did with those Black men over a 40-year period of time.
Get it.
And it's noteworthy to know that it was a white person who blew the whistle. Okay. And there were careers that were made. The nurse Evers, Merle Evers, I can't think of her first name. She was able to, hide behind being a black woman and nurse and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, she was being used by the government. And that's the big thing. This is an example of how black people are used to advance white interests. But the fact remains that you had doctors, you had nurses, you had a whole cadre of black professionals who knew about the study, and they said nothing, they did nothing. They benefited from that study and what have you, and it remains a stain on our history in the 20th century. And what we're dealing with right now is no different. It is no different. And we have a class of black people, I call them, these are colonized people, okay? A colonized class of black professionals who are just carrying out the imperatives of American colonialism. And I'm going to be fair and to say that colonized people all over the world do this.
Yeah.
The colonized people, the colonized elites in Africa and all 54 countries, the president of Niger just got, dethroned, okay? Because they got tired of that colonial puppet. But there are so many other instances in Africa, in Brazil, in the Caribbean, all over the place. In India, in particular, all right? And we are no different. We are no different. And so if you're a black professional, you have to make an ethical decision about who you are and what you want to, what legacy you want to leave or what have you. I think all of us do what we do because this stuff is intolerable, it's unbearable, it's immoral, it's downright evil. You understand? You know what I mean? It's like, and I hate to be hyperbolic, you know what I mean? It's like, a Jewish person in Nazi Germany just watching, their fellow Jews being sent to the gas chamber, you know what I mean? And being used, by the Nazis in the process, helping them in their final solution, and so I think it depends on that. The other part of it, and I know I'm going on, the other part of it is to continue to talk. You got to have brothers and sisters who are willing to take the risk, who are on the outside, who are in media. The beautiful thing is that, technology has revolutionized everything. The people whom we are criticizing, they never anticipated what we're doing right now. They never anticipated it, okay? Dr. Johnson just got his book published, okay, by a major academic press, okay? And much of the gravitas that he has right now is connected to the fact that he is on YouTube and that he is known. People know who he is, and what have you. And we're pushing the envelope. But there's no way to get around risk. There's no way to get around risk. Sacrifice, putting it on the line. And I'll just say this, I'm not going to go into it. I've taken hits personally. I've taken hits professionally, dealing with professional stuff right now as a result of my own advocacy on social media. So It's up to the individual.
Well, let me do this. I'm still inviting people up that have a short story they might want to share about something they've experienced. I put a couple of examples people wrote in on the screen. I don't care if you're talking about what's the name of that office that most companies have? Damn it. HR. Thank you. Whether it's the HR story or some of that nature, you're welcome to come up. I want to get Gigi to answer the question. Then I'll answer, and then I have a question for Torraine. But Gigi, did you have a response to Torraine's question, or did you need to rehear it?
Yeah, I think I know what he says. How can you begin to challenge these kind of
how can you challenge these sort of narratives, and how can you challenge some of these theories and practices inside the academy?
Well, I'm a philosopher first and foremost, so I believe you should question everything, but most people don't. Like Ronald was discussing, and one of the things you got to understand is that what you're asking for really is a paradigm shift, okay, and which is ultimately a paradigm shift in the social scientific world or the world of the humanities would be like a fundamental change in the underlying concepts and the schema or practices of a particular field. And this is difficult to achieve in the social sciences because oftentimes you got preconceived notions and existing frameworks that dominate. And unfortunately, in this case, you have a paradigm that like man bad, woman good, woman wonderful, men are pernicious. And it's kind of stuck because you got the law behind it. When sex and gender was tacked on to the Civil Rights Act, this gave, a lot of women, a voice. And I don't think they should have a voice, but I think in the context of the academy, your voice just can't be one of, you have to be challenged. Your voice can't go unchecked. And unfortunately, in the academy, the feminist voice has not been subjected to any scrutiny, any rigorous scrutiny. And so it's just become like a field where people can express, their disgruntledness with the system and so on and so forth. But I mean, the problem lies when you got new people coming into these disciplines and coming into, the academy, and there are authority figures there that kind of indoctrinate them with the paradigm. So, I mean, and of course, as you know, I mean, most people, there have been studies, psychological studies, like, for example, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Oh, yes.
Or the Milgram experiment, where you had Stanley Milgram. He conducted an experiment where you had people who were wearing lab coats, and they ordered people, to administer, tests, and the test would give shocks to, people, but they were just actors or whatever the case may be. So people tend to follow authority figures, and in the university, we already know who the authority figures are: the administrators and the professors. Who are tenured and who have clout and acclaim and so on and so forth. So it becomes difficult to challenge these people, and then your degree is predicated upon their approval and their recommendations and all of this. So and there's a culture of it's like an echo chamber culture, really,
right?
Where any challenging to anything that's said becomes like almost heresy. So. I mean, you can imagine, but there are challenges that are taking place. But I think more than anything else, like Dr. Neal was saying, you got to take a risk. And actually, you got to do your job. You have to be orientated towards determining what the truth is. Even if the truth makes people uncomfortable or, it hurts people's research. If you are an academician, you should hope that if you're wrong, that what you're wrong about gets pointed out so that you can improve what it is that, you study. But that's not how things work in the academy. A lot of people's reputations are based upon their prior work and, the honors they received. And it's just a bunch of nonsense, if you ask me. I'm just going to keep it real. At this point, man, there's been no pushback. These people have just had an echo chamber. And I'm glad that brothers are beginning to, take the risk and to say something and to speak, about their own experiences. That's all it really takes is people speaking and saying something. But, that's often difficult to do.
Well, and I'm very much in line with Gigi. I ran across this article. I got a couple people coming in. Just be patient. I'm gonna finish my answer. I'm gonna ask Torraine a question, then I'll start bringing in a couple people. Make sure if you have your camera on that's something you want to do. So just be aware when you come in. All right. But this is something I ran across the other day, sent to me, National Association of Scholars, website. And you have this article, Faculty Fight for Academic Freedom at Harvard. Right. So basically what you have is essentially, faculty coming together because a lot of this politically correct culture, the language we see in the humanities that really stems from intersectional feminism and a number of other things has gotten so out of control. And the culture of teaching has gotten so out of control. Safe spaces, pronouns. It's gotten to such a degree that you actually have faculty who are actually starting to come together and not only protect themselves for, how they may be treated by administrators and policy, but also from students. in terms of what the students have grown to expect and want to hear. It's almost religious in its orientation. It's not about scholarship, research, reflection, dialogue, debate. It's not about any of that. It's often about regurgitating the company line as far as what is politically correct. And so you have faculty coming together. Now, the reason I bring this up is I think Black men, or those who at least want to advocate against anti-Black misandry, should do something similar. And that may be something that I'm going to push, but it will depend on people, as Dr. Neal and Gigi have pointed out. It's going to depend on people to still be courageous and be able to stand up publicly, at least to say, look, we will not accept anti-Black misandry, whether it's in scholarship, casual conversation, or policy, whether it's in hiring, promotion, whatever. We are not going to accept this, and we're willing to stand together, arms locked against it. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, because it's there are things that can be done, but at the end of the day, it's going to take the same thing it's going to take regardless. It's going to take courage, which is one of the reasons I respect the three of you, because all three of you stood up and said something in an environment that's hostile to everything you're talking about. You know what I mean? So, but the question I wanted to extend to Torraine, because Dr. Neal laid out a number of professions where we see this anti-Black misandry and how it needs to be called out, most particularly in the academy. But I wanted to ask you, Torraine, in particular, how do you see this in terms of journalism? And I know journalism comes in many different forms, but how do you see it playing out, and what do you think the solutions are in that space?
I'm glad you asked me that. Well, I think most of the people here, most of the people watching, know about some of the biases when it comes to Black men when they're portrayed in media. If we're just talking about mainstream news, we know that anytime there's a Black suspect, anytime there's any somebody, there's a suspicion of somebody Black and male who's done something, local news is one of the biggest perpetrators of some of the boogeyman stories when it comes to somebody who's a Black person who may be a suspect. If they have a mugshot, sometimes the mugshots are darkened up. Sometimes if they don't have a mugshot, they try to pick the worst picture they can find of somebody, even if the young boy may have maybe in his cap and gown like Mike Brown was. They'll try to go and scour his internet profile and find him holding some money with a gun or something like that, and they'll put that out there. They do that, and those sort of things are important, because if you can get the mentality of people with visuals and see this person doing something that the mainstream of the people who are your viewers see as doing something that's transgressive, they're automatically going to they're going to equate that Black boy with criminal activity. So we already know that goes on. When we have some things in national news or in cable news where there's a Black man who may be accused of wrongdoing or may even be suspected of wrongdoing, people will go and dig through his full life story to find something that may be minor or may not even be anything that's that serious, to put that out there and make that the headline. That happens. So if we're talking about anti-Black misandry in mainstream journalism, that absolutely is very much a thing. And you can make a case to say that a lot of American journalism is built on that, all the way going back to the 20s, when the way they would report on things like the Tulsa, the destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Klan riots and that sort of thing. It took Ida B. Wells to give you a whole different narrative to say, no, this man was brutally murdered and lynched and castrated. This is what happened.
Right.
What happened in Tulsa was a hate crime. That was a war crime, basically. You know what I mean? The first time that American bombers had bombed Americans in American history. And I'm saying all that to say this. I don't really hold out much hope in mainstream journalism and mainstream media for Black men to really get their story told. I think it can happen in small doses. You can find sympathetic platforms to go on to and say that, but the mainstream of journalism in America is based on money, and it's based on pulling in viewers. And the main people who watch these things are white women in the suburbs who sit as far away from Black communities as they can, and nothing gets them watching it anymore. Nothing makes them more excited than a crime story. And if you have a crime story with a young Black boy with his dreads all sprayed out, looking at you like he's about to come through the TV like The Ring, that sort of thing makes people watch. And that sort of thing does something to your psyche, and it makes you think that anybody who's Black is automatically a criminal. Now, I think what can be changed is something that I actually was a part of, but I didn't even know I was a part of it. When I was working in mainstream media around the time when the police shootings were commonplace with Mike Brown and with Alton Sterling and these sort of things, you started seeing things that I had never really seen before. You saw people like CNN. You saw people like Don Lemon going into these communities. You saw them going into Baltimore and Baton Rouge. And if you remember, what you saw was a lot of young Black people, Black men and Black women, physically snatching the mic away from these people and cussing at them and saying, nah, what you're saying is bullshit. This is what's going on. This is what has to happen. And you also saw the rise of people with cell phones taking pictures and videos of what was going on and what the police were doing. And what happened was mainstream media started paying attention to these young black people with cell phones, and they started shifting the story away from their original narrative onto these people with cell phones. And I think that goes back to your point earlier about the fact that we have technology at our fingertips. We have something right now that we can be a media company in your own home, and you can go out here and find a story, and you can go up and build an audience and do it that way. It's going to be a slow climb, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle in some places. But I think there's an audience out here that's aware that what the narrative they're getting from mainstream media is not what they're getting from. It's not the truth. It's not the whole truth. So you have to go to people you trust, and you have to go to people you can rely on to give you a more well-rounded story and listen to them. I think I'm one of those people. I think other people are some of those people, but we're all in silos and everything. And we have to start figuring out ways to kind of get together and support each other in different ways, financially and supporting each other. We're telling the same stories in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I'm going to do, I have 4 people in the back room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them up each one at a time in the order they came in and have them tell a quick story about their experience. Now, from there, I want to actually, now for the 3 of you, I understand, for 2 of you, you just popped up and I appreciate it. I don't know what your time looks like. Torraine, I know it's been up here for almost 2 hours. I appreciate it. You are absolutely welcome to stay. If you got to go, I understand. But I'm going to bring up these brothers one at a time, let them tell their stories, bring them down, and y'all can respond and we can keep it pushing. And if you got to go, just holler at us. But before you leave, I do want you to share with the audience what you got going on and where they can find you. So just let me know before you tap out so we can get that in. So let me bring up first. The first person I want to bring up is it Terrell or Terrell?
Terrell.
Terrell, can you hear
me?
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah, I got a story.
Cool.
I used to be an adjunct professor of political science at a local community college in Detroit. This was back in 2009. And I had a colleague who was an administrator. She had a real bratty daughter that took a course of mine. I used to teach American government. And she didn't do any work. So I had to flunk her. But at the time, they were cutting back on part-time staff. So you know what the daughter did.
Okay.
And so that just hastened my exit from teaching at the college level. And now I'm in security. But I was thinking about something that you all were saying and how you were framing it. What you guys have right now could be advanced if we had a strong political action committee. We had a good PAC. We'd have the perfect instrument to deal with this. One of the things that the American Jews have is APAC, the Americans for Israel Political Action Committee. A guy named Finlay wrote a book, None Dare Speak Out, and he talked about how that's one of the most effective PACs in the world. And they get things done over and over again. And we got enough strong, smart, well-researched people, black men in particular now, that probably we've ever had. And it would be perfect. We just need to build it.
Right. Well, I put my email in the back chat. Stay in contact with me, brother, and we can dialogue about that. And I appreciate you sharing your story, man.
Thanks.
All right.
I'll drop back.
All right. Any responses to that before we bring up the next one? Any thoughts from any of you?
I think that's a brilliant idea. My issue with it, though, I don't have an issue with that idea. I think it's brilliant. The thing of it is, how are you going to build that and try to avoid mission creep? Because what happens with black organizations is you start out one way, and what happens is people start moving in and they start trying to shift the needle away from your core message and your core mission into all these other different dynamics, because it'll start out talking about black men and our message and how we can fund and how we can build that up. Then somebody will come in and say, what about gender? And then it'll be, what about women? And then it'll be, what about, LGBTQ and that sort of thing. And that's part of my issue. How do you stay on message and push back against some of the attacks? Because anytime black men, it's almost like in slavery, 3 of us get in one space like we're doing right now, overseer is going to come along and be like, what you boys doing? Although now they farm that off to the Brittany Coopers of the world and say what y'all ends doing out there and stuff. And you know it's gonna happen. So that's gonna be my issue.
But any thoughts, especially in relation to his story? I want to get that in as well. So you got a brother who went from adjunct professor to security, right? Because he didn't toe the line and he graded a student based on her performance. Any thoughts on that?
It just, our condition is tenuous, man. It's a tenuous situation, man. You know what I mean? And tenuous and precarious. It's just reflective of the general black male condition, man. One day you can be, relatively, well off or in a decent position, and the next day, you're falling. You're in a spiral. You know what I mean? And it can happen to anybody. And people at the highest level. It's just an unfortunate fact, of being black and male in America.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and bring up the next one. This is Nate. Nate, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead and share your story with us, man.
Oh man, I can literally go on for hours. How many stories I have about this? Like the biggest one, when I was working at corporate AT&T, and I was facing some discrimination from the general manager in the area, and he tapped on the shoulder of a black woman to investigate me. And when she couldn't find anything, she just straight out lied. And I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, just let you know the region. And I lost my job. I was getting paid good money, and I lost my job and I had to fight to get my job back. It took about 30 days. When I came back, I won the case from the union and things like that. When I finally got my job back, they put in a new manager, which is another black woman, and she fired me 2 weeks after I just got my job back.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, man, it's on, like, with black, they use black women as a tool, because the likelihood of a woman or a man standing up for the justice, it's easier to push a woman to do the bidding when she have bills to pay. I might take a chance. I do things on the side, my own business, things like that. But it's on every level. Even when I have 2 daughters, and when I took the mother to court, I purchased a lawyer, expensive lawyer in Atlanta, and she pretty much missed my case. It was a black woman, and it was an important day, and she cost me big time in the case. And I ended up having to call a black man lawyer, and he told me a lot of information. I ended up having to fire her. So it's unfortunate. I mean, you don't want to recognize it, but that's what's happening in our society right now.
Okay. Thanks a lot, good brother. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody want to say anything before we move on? It's up to you. Okay. Then I will go ahead and bring in LaShawn. LaShawn, can you hear us?
Yeah, I just cut myself off mute.
Okay, cool. I don't know if I pronounced your name right.
You said it precisely right. The first one, and that's why Eric Rose named after me.
Go ahead and share your story with us, brother.
All right. First, I would like to acknowledge all y'all. Y'all is just nothing but hitting points after point after point after point, and it's just simple points, and we all can do. On the earlier guy, that was the first guy you just said, share your thoughts. How about this? All y'all already have it. Remember, you got Charles Faulkner, the initiative. Y'all all got this. I mean, why don't y'all just do it privately for right now and build it and get the foundation, the rules, the regulations, all that, and then it's legit, because everybody who joins, like we join you, it's legit. It ain't no, we ain't no. This is stuff that we go through, and y'all is legitimately, might be putting your careers online because Your careers might be online.
Mm.
You know, this could
Okay.
pop back and turn on you real quick. But y'all sharing it with us. I mean, you already got the foundation. I mean, you already got the mindset. You the academia. You got guys that ain't even academia. They didn't even get through college. They went to technical school. They got computer skills out their butts.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff. You got it. I mean, just start it there. Make it private. The people you know you can trust on
Mm.
that one. If okay, now you did a clip earlier where that guy asked that woman, "You're a defense attorney."
Mm-hmm.
That's how you do. If you're an academic, that's how you turn the tables on them. When you sit there and make them shut up, because now they realize, holy crap,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that now you show them you stupid with a college degree and a
Okay.
master's because y'all dealing with them, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's how you turn it on them. When you make their argument sound so damn stupid, they
Mm-hmm.
sound like the woman in the street or the Negro that's on the corner. That's how you
Okay.
turn their minds. Okay.
Okay.
Other than that, my story is I was always the I was always the guy that you know what, he's at the house. How about we just call him? Sean, you need to get up there and do his job for us real quick because you know such and such he gotta get to his kids. Well, he got 5 jobs left on the table and he started earlier than I did. And I had 20 houses to do.
Mm.
Well, you know, you got to do this. And, you know, that's what they did. And so they ran me like a dog. And then one dude, because his wife worked at the thing, but he was cheating on his wife. And he was cheating on his wife when he met the wife he had. And he was cheating on the new wife. And then when they transferred me to his office, he fired me the next damn day.
Okay. Okay.
But honestly, y'all right now, y'all do what you're doing. Y'all is telling us advice, and even an idiot with common sense, that when he sees it, and then we tell our stories, he gonna realize it. So keep doing the job you're doing. Keep educating us, and then damn it, get us a spell right so we can sign the petition.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for
Y'all
coming
be
up.
good, man.
You too. All right. So remember, we're talking about white collar brothers' experiences with white collar black women, and whether or not you have something to share on that. I'll bring up. I am just Jules. I am. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead and
All
share
right.
your thoughts, man.
I got 3 stories, and I'll try and go through them quickly, but I'll try and be clear. So the first one, I was on a search committee about 3 years ago, and they were trying to bring in Ayala Manzant just after she had been dropped from her show. And I was one of the people that was on the select committee. The women on the committee, the black women on it, were abjectly refusing to have her in attendance. And she had already lowered her attendance fee because, you're a television personality, you're already going to get a boost. But she had just dropped off of it, so she took a pay cut. And they were not for it. I was for it just because I thought she was hitting a point of trying to, push accountability, trying to bridge a lot of gaps. But they were visibly against it and notably against it. The other women on the committee and the other men on the committee were neutral, right? And they were non-black, non-white. But that's one thing. 2, my first job out of graduate school, I was in a weird position where a woman who I was not interested in, she looked like an egg on legs. She used to send me, this black woman, she used to send me pictures of her private parts, right? And she would meet me in the garage, or try to meet me in the garage when I was trying to get in my car, and she would just try and talk me up and then try and get after me. But I would politely say, you know what, I have to meet my friends, going to the gym, going to happy hour, et cetera, and try and decline. When I declined her too many times, she brought it up to my supervisor, who was not her own, but it was another black woman. And that woman, who had, I think, 3 weeks before, gave me 4 out of 5 star reviews, because it's hard to get 5 out of 5 stars. 2 weeks later, within 2 weeks, started chipping away. And within a month, I was gone from that organization. And that set me on a different path than what I had planned on, right? And then third, since about 2017, I've tracked all of my interviews and requests of interviews from recruiters. And I try to note, and I started making a big note of it in 2020 and went back and started like looking at the pictures on Gmail and, trying to put who are the people that I'm meeting when I contact for jobs. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Are they black? Are they white? Are they non-white? If so, what do I estimate their demographic to be? What is my path? Am I being reached out to quickly? 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks? And then what is my response to it? And then how is my demeanor coming out from it? Do I think it was a hostile meeting? Do I think it was engaging? Do I think it was neutral? And I would say 30, if it's a black woman, 30% acceptance rate for the next level. If it's a non-black, non-white woman, slightly higher, around 42%. Man, non-black, non-white man, slightly higher, about 49%. Non-black, white man, about 51%. White woman, about 53%. And this is not to say I'm like a stellar person, but I'm saying like in that filter from initial phase through completion, I've just seen that the most antagonistic and I have I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, I have several certifications. I'm pretty accomplished and I come off well. I look like Torraine's darker brother. I have the clean cut, crisp beard. I have my ties, I have my tie clips, I have my pocket square. I'm not looking busted. I have my glasses, there's you're not gonna catch me with like a ham and cheese sandwich on my eyeglasses. But I've noticed that it is a lot more rigorous, and I'm not gonna be pushed to the next level unless it's a black woman who is. And I've noticed that if they have a foreign last name, I have a slightly better shot, or if they are multiracial.
Okay. Man, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. And I did purchase some book. I'm going to start reading it this weekend. It's been a busy past week.
Man, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
I love the form of it. Thank you, sir. Y'all have a good night, sirs.
You too. Right. Any responses to that? Any thoughts?
Wow. Like I said, first of all, man, I'm glad that these brothers feel comfortable enough to come in here and share their stories. But a lot of our black men, man, in these situations suffer in silence, or they suffer financially and professionally in silence because nobody wants to hear what they have to say. And think about it, how does that affect the earning power of brothers who are trying to quote unquote do the right thing? They've gone through all the steps that society says to go through to be successful. They get there, and then you have a woman who looks just like you, who's ready, sitting there waiting with a knife to cut your throat. And now you can't provide for yourself. You can't provide for a potential mate. And what does that do to your psyche? You know what I mean? It's just sad. It's sad, and it's crazy.
Yes.
And the other unfortunate thing about it is, you got all these women around saying they want men of a certain kind of status, earning a certain amount of salary, but you undercut us at the, at the corporate or at the academic level. It's like, what's the point? We're supposed to be working in coordination and in conjunction with each other, but in order to, gain status and I guess, to play out some sort of twisted version of plantation politics, we're at each other's throats. So then the question is, how can you get what you want if you undermine the very individuals who you say are supposed to be able to provide you with the resources and the so-called protection you say you want? You can't have it both ways. You can't seek to undermine and undercut somebody and then expect for them to be able to do, what traditional masculinity requires them to do. It's impossible. And look. All I can say is, man, that there's an ethos, a kind of a zeitgeist in which, as a black man, you're supposed to get checked. And nobody seems to have an issue or a problem with checking you. Okay? Now, the first time I came into contact with Dr. Johnson, I tell this story quite often, but I'll just tell it because other people were telling their stories. So I made a post on Facebook about Serena Williams and about how people consistently say that she looks masculine, but then at the same time, I think, I'm not going to dead name this individual. Caitlyn Jenner was given an award for being like the woman of the year or a beautiful woman. So I said, so Serena Williams is an ugly man, but Caitlyn Jenner is a beautiful woman, and I kind of left like a scratching head emoji or something like that. And then this right trans person came out and just told me you're being transphobic, you're using your black male privilege to, speak in a negative and a derisive manner of a trans person, and I was like taken aback by it because I'm like, privilege. That's the first time I really actually was in conversation with someone who used the term black male privilege, because I had never heard of the term before. And like, look, I'm an ex-con. There's a lot of that I've been through in my life that demonstrates, at least to my knowledge, from my standpoint, that I don't even have any idea what this privilege could possibly be. And so Curry and Johnson were like, hold on, wait a minute, man. She said, they said what? And that's how we became closer, me and Johnson. But it's just wild, man. The kind of things you got to endure and the kind of confrontations that you'll get into just for speaking your mind. But it's important for people to actually speak and to say what it is that they feel and what they think, because otherwise it'll be a missed opportunity for you to challenge people who assume that their position or their viewpoint is just the correct position. And I mean, if you don't challenge them, how can they know? Okay, I mean, they'll believe that they're above reproach, and nobody's above reproach.
Absolutely, and I want to share in relation to what you just said. I wanted to share Shay Charday's post and Torraine's response to it. So Shay Charday says, "Black male privilege be like first to die, last hired, first fired, most violated, least respected. How's that for privilege?" And then Torraine shared it and says, "Don't forget our privilege allows us to hog all the jail cells, homeless shelters, and police bullets."
Yeah.
And I said something, and look, I'm sorry, I know you were about to speak, but I said something similar to that. I'm like, the privilege to get killed and murdered by police.
Exactly.
The privilege to, the privilege to, have your children alienated from you. The privilege to, do time and be incarcerated. Like, I mean, what privilege in years in that?
Right.
And then they start comparing and contrasting your plight with that of black women or black trans women. And I'm like, look, man, this just doesn't really even add up. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, how many black trans women die per year from police violence, or even from anybody at all in the entirety of the country? Like less than 50, 60 people.
Oh man, I put the exact number in the book, and it will shock you. It will shock you. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Gigi.
But I mean, you just got to think, like, how many black trans people die, trans women die a year in total from any kind of death, let alone, police killings. And so, it's my whole viewpoint on it is people will tell you where you're wrong, and they will, try to shame and humiliate you. But you have a duty to not take that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a duty to say, the way you're characterizing me is not right. And a lot of people don't do it. They go along to get along because, let's face it though, what Dr. Neal says is right, man. A lot of people, man, are looking for, because it takes a long time, man, to work on a graduate degree and to actually be in, an environment where you might get a job. And so you don't want to screw all of that up by being a contrarian, you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's two kind of competing interest there. One the interest to be a good academician and to work in service of the truth. The other is to work in service of your own financial or fiduciary interest. So it's a difficult thing to balance.
Yeah. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I have one more person to bring up, but go ahead and make your statement.
No, I just wanted to say that you're absolutely right. That sometimes these narratives are so strong and they're so powerful, and they're pushed by outside sources, and they're pushed by outside agitators with unlimited resources, that it doesn't matter whether they line up with the data or not. If people want to believe something, they're going to believe it. And that's the danger in a lot of these conversations, because I think the number of black trans women that have been killed over the past 3 years is like something like less than 100. It's a tragedy, but what happens is that gets extrapolated to say that even though all you need is that number. And sometimes they don't even talk about the number. All you got to do is say Black trans women are under attack and they're being killed. And in the public mind, that conjures up an image of Black men riding around in trucks like the Turnbull ACs from the Warriors with chains looking for Black gay people to beat up. And that's not even the case. Half the time, and the data has shown that Black men tend to be more progressive and more advanced on LGBTQ issues than any other group, but that doesn't get told. And it has to be, those stories have to be told, and those narratives have to be debunked. Otherwise, they can create policy, and they can create horrible policy that puts Black men on attack.
Yep, absolutely. Let me bring in Wrench Turner. Wrench, man, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? What's going on, Doc?
Yes, sir. What's good with you, man?
Brother, if I had one of your hands, I'd cut both mine off. Salute to the esteemed panel, and salute to the brothers in the chat.
Salute to you, brother.
Salute. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So I work in senior leadership at the director level for Fortune 500. And the initiatives that come down, female frontline initiatives, diversity and inclusion, a lot of the stuff that gets pushed, they're literally trying to push women into spaces where they do not have a history of being successful. And what I want brothers to take away from these spaces and how to navigate this landmine when it comes to dealing with white collar B-dubs, right? Number one, exercise that D-discipline that they talk about in these spaces, because what happens is you have someone like me who is in these spaces and donate as much as I can to a lot of different platforms, and want brothers to do well. What I've seen is a lot of time they fall for the banana in the tailpipe, meaning the sisters run a play on them. Hey, you know, can we go out to dinner? Or hey, you know, you look nice, and then the out of line text messages start, and then maybe you start hanging out outside of work. And the minute that things come off the rails, that is the first thing that they run to. And I've seen many brothers go the way of the dodo bird because of not being able to think through what the situation really is, like the landscape. They don't know the landscape. The other piece too is one of the ways that you can try and insulate yourself. It's not a completely fail-safe answer to what our problem is, but one of the ways that you can try and insulate yourself from some of this, number one, is be careful how you move in the workplace, but also be hyper productive. For me, I've been someone that you can basically send to any problem area in the plant or in the company, anywhere in the country, and generate a lot of money. I'm talking about, I think the last time I looked, I generated like 38 million for this company that I work for, just being a change agent, going into different plants that are struggling, flipping the culture around, improving the process, and so on and so forth. The last bit, and then I'll land my plane, is I did a podcast for a guy that I know, and that is centered around leadership. And a lot of people in the company that I work for listen to this podcast. A lot of them are Naval Academy, Annapolis, West Point grads, but they all work in senior leadership, even at the corporate level, some of the executives. And one of the things that I made sure to mention, and this is what I mean by playing chess versus checkers, one of the things that I made sure to mention when they asked, hey, so outside of, you know, what it is that you do, what are some things that you're passionate about? And I on purposely told them men's advocacy. And the number of men that reached out to add me on LinkedIn, I mean, people I didn't even know, you know, senior managers in finance, you know, general manager of, you know, regional sales managers, just saying, hey man, I appreciate you. These are white guys, black guys, Indian guys. Hey man, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I listened to your story, man. It is profound. I want to know, is it okay if I add you onto my network? Then the last little piece, they are, and when I say they, I'm talking about B-dubs, they are all up and through diversity and inclusion. They are all up and through HR at the highest levels, all the way up into corporate. So be mindful of that when you walk into these environments. Listen to the information that happens on panels like this and some of the others that happen in the space, and use that to walk into these places of business with the veil lifted. You don't have to have conversations about it. You don't have to tell anybody what you listen to on Thursday night at 10:26 Eastern time. Just go into those businesses with the veil lifted and govern yourselves accordingly.
Yes, sir.
I'll land my plane there, brother.
Yes, sir. Always good to hear from you, bro.
Absolutely. Likewise. GG, man, you know Optimus Prime is my husband, man. But I played a sound bite on this channel.
Yeah, he wild, man. You're a wild boy, man.
Hey, Rich, I'd love to get your info, man, because I want to hear a little bit more about the podcast you listen to and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Matter of fact, I can send you the Spotify link to it so you can listen to it in its entirety, bro.
Okay, please do.
Absolutely, brother. Hey, y'all have a good one. I appreciate you having me up.
All right, man. Take care, man.
And holler at me when you get a chance about your situation with your kids. What the update is. So
absolutely will do, brothers. I appreciate y'all.
All right, man. Peace.
Peace.
All right. Any thoughts about Wrench Turner? Any reflections, observations, anything like that?
Oh man, let me see. I think, it's sad that we even have to have conversations where you have to gird your iron. You have to guard yourself and armor yourself to even go into a conversation with who is supposed to be your sisters. But this is just the reality that we live in, man. And we have to be aware that there are people out there who look like us. There are Black women who don't have your best interest at heart, and there is a lot of opportunism out there. But as far as like what he said, I think what really has to happen again is that Black men who are on code have to start mentoring other brothers again, whether it's younger brothers, whether it's brothers who are older, who've been in the game, who've been veterans, so to speak. We got to start creating these links so we can mentor each other anymore. Unfortunately, we don't all live in the same neighborhoods like we used to because we are not forced to anymore, where you could go to the brother up the street and sit on his step and get some game. We got to actively seek brothers out, and we had to start building these connections again. I know I need to start doing it, and that's something I'll admit. That's something I've been kind of like fighting against, but sometimes, you don't know what wisdom you have until somebody asks you and then it comes out. But we got to start doing this again, because if we don't support ourselves as Black men, nobody else is going to do it. Not even a lot of our sisters. So we got to put these things in place. It's imperative.
That is real talk, because I will be getting on a plane in the next few months, and the first person I'm gonna go mentee under is the mad professor himself. I'm gonna take notes. I'm gonna be like a student right at the desk, man. Real talk. But I think what we can do from here is I'm going to close out, and I'll just kind of have each one of you go in the backwards order you came in. So I'm going to start with Gigi. I want you to give us, any closing thoughts, but also let people know what you're up to now, anything you want them to check out. Gigi just dropped a show a couple hours ago that you got to go check out. Maybe he'll mention it. But starting with Gigi, any closing thoughts and what you want people to know about what you're doing?
Yeah, my closing thoughts are, I guess I want to echo what Torraine just talked about, what Ron talked about, and what you already know yourself, Dr. Johnson. I mean, ultimately, we shouldn't have to be at odds with the very people who are supposed to be our sisters, man. We should share a linked fate or some understanding that we got to look out for each other. And if we don't, then we'll be divided, and then we can be manipulated and exploited in any way that the people who've been exploiting us for centuries, I mean, they already have. So it just makes their work easier and prevents us from being able to move forward, to develop wealth and strong communities and so on and so forth. So, but the reality is you got to guard yourself. So just be smart, be tight-lipped, be careful of what you say, but at the same time, be strategic and don't let yourself get, pushed around. That's one thing you don't want to do. So be able to dot your I's and cross your T's. But ultimately, all I'm doing is just doing my my little YouTube thing, man. Almost 3 times a week. I'm loud, I'm raucous, I'm a little bit profane, I'm vulgar, but that's just who I am, man. I do it all in good faith. I do it all because I want you to take on some hard questions, deal with some difficult issues, contend with them, and that's where I'm at, man.
Well, and if you come up into his show talking shit, you might get cussed out. So be very careful how you approach the Green Gorilla.
yeah, I'll curse you out a little bit, man. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think that, the civil discourse, the objective, impartial, disconnected discourse that the corporate world demands that you engage in, or that, the academy demands that you engage in. I mean, there's a place for that, but I mean, there's also a place to deviate from that path. And so, I try to provide a place where, you can say what you want to say, you can feel how you want to feel, you can express how you want to express without fear of being, terminated to be, rejected and you know, summarily disrespected. So there you go.
Yeah, real talk. Appreciate you, Gigi. Thanks for coming through, man.
Show, man. Peace.
Peace. Y'all check out the Green Gorilla right here on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel and be there on the regular.
Peace.
Peace. The Mad Professor. Any closing thoughts, and what do you want people to know about where you're going next?
Yeah, I would just to echo what Gigi said and what Vince Turner also said. It's important to be strategic, in these spaces and what have you. And I would say to treat everything from the standpoint of business. It might be helpful for you brothers to refer to our Black female counterparts, or to think of them as our sisters. Okay, it might be helpful for you to kind of disabuse yourself of the idea that there's some type of real familiar connection that's there, and that when you work with them in these spaces, that they're going to treat you like some loving family member, which is contrary to what often happens in these spaces, man. You know what I mean? I would say, to invoke a science fiction character, you might want to be like Spock, Star Trek. Seriously, in these spaces, and that involves having the discipline and everything. I would say practice social distancing as much as you can. Don't get caught up in too much fraternization and the rah and the buddy stuff. Just not getting too familial. Just with Black women in general, but women and Black women in particular, but women in general and what have you. Some might think it's too cold and distant or what have you, man, but this is all about self-preservation. And it's about, you protecting yourself in everything. Always think 10, 20, 15 steps ahead. And what I'm saying to you is what I've lived, up to this point, you know what I mean? And I think that at this point in time, 2023 and moving forward, Black men are just going to have to change their orientation towards our counterparts, who are Black and female and what have you. And again, it ain't what they, regard as hate or misogyny or whatever. It's just being smart, what I mean? And so, that's what I have to say, man. You all know where to find me, Ronald Neal on YouTube or what have you. I'm TMP, the Mad Professor. Thank you guys for having me. It's good to be in fellowship with you, Torraine and all that. I follow you on Twitter and Facebook, and you're doing the Lord's work, brother. So
thank you, brother. I appreciate that, and you as well, my man. We definitely got a link.
Absolutely. And thank you, Dr. J. Y'all get the book. I'm so happy that all the Black male studies brothers are producing text after text after text after text. And the future looks bright, man. We have this technology in our hands, and we're doing things that Black men had never imagined 10, 15 years ago, man. So if there's anything to keep us hopeful, man, I think that reality is one of those things. So you all take care, man, and I will see you all soon.
You as well, man.
All right, brother.
Peace out.
And I tell you, man, that's a conversation I want to hear. You and Dr. Neal sit down and chop it up. But go ahead, man. Any closing thoughts? And definitely let people know where to find you, what they can, how they can support you.
Okay. First of all, man, I want to thank you for facilitating this conversation, brother. We really, really appreciate your work out here, man. And these are the conversations that we got to have with each other. Black men basically have to realize that they are powerful. Black men have to realize that their opinions, their experiences, and their lives are worthy of respect, and their stories are worthy to be told. And we have to reclaim that again. I think for a long time, for the past few years, in the public discourse, the idea of Black men standing up on their square and speaking out for themselves has really been attacked. It's really been pushed back. But I feel like Black men have their backs against the wall in a lot of places.
Mhm.
And when you corner any living thing, it either surrenders or it fights. Black men have always fought. Black men are going to have to get that warrior spirit back in. And that's it, whether that's, in the academy, whether that's in these verbal streets, whether that's in these actual streets. And if that means we have to go at it with some of the people who claim to be our skin folk, then that's what it's got to be, because we're really facing the crisis of survival at this point. We're facing a physical crisis of survival, and we're facing a psychological crisis of survival.
Right.
We've been gaslit. We've been told that we're not worthy. We've been told that we don't have to talk to each other. We don't even have to talk to each other. And we have to push back against that. We have to reject that, and we have to physically fight. You know what I mean? That's where we're at. And we got to be able to stand on our square and not be afraid to speak. That's where I feel like that's why things change. I think things change with the word. They change with the mindset. And once you have that, then you can build with people who have that same mindset and start doing that. But it's not going to be easy, but it's got to get done. That's where I feel like we're at.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How can we support you, bro?
You can support me by Cash App. That's the easiest way to do it. You can go to my Cash App. $ Torraine Walker is scrolling right there. I also do t-shirts. The t-shirt I'm wearing right now is one from my line. It's called my clothing line is Speak Free. I have a show called shirts called Black Men Speak Freely. I also made some I made some Montgomery, Alabama shirts that are getting real hot right now. I just made this on the spur of the moment. You can go to my shop that's going down there. You can find me there. I'm also making some content on TikTok. I've bit the bullet and realized that everybody's getting their education off TikTok. So I made a TikTok account. So I'm going to be making content for there. That's going to be edifying. It's going to be funny as well. Basically, the stuff you like that I do on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to be doing that in a video standpoint, and I'm going to have data to back it up. So that's going to be interesting. And you can also support me on my website, torrainewalker.com. You can go there. There's a support link on there where you can show me love either through Cash App, PayPal, my Patreon, or my Venmo. And everything under the main tick, Torraine Walker. Nobody else has it because I'm the only person in the country that has that name. So I'm not hard to find. So you can show me love there. I'm an independent journalist. I'm a solopreneur. So anything anybody would love to contribute to my work, I'd appreciate.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, bro. Appreciate you coming through.
My pleasure, brother. Always a pleasure, man. And anytime you want me to come through, I'll try to come through.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you got to stand an invitation, man. But thank you.
All right.
All right, man. I'll holler at you.
Peace.
Peace. Shout out to Torraine for coming through. Shout out to Dr. Neal. Shout out to the Green Gorilla. Shout out to everybody in the comment section that contributed to the conversation. Shout out to the brothers that came up and told their stories. That can be a very dangerous thing. So whenever brothers are willing to do that, I can't do anything but, salute to you. But we need to hear more. So in the comment section, let us know if you got some stories you want to bring to bear, because we really want to come to a point where we can articulate what our issues are. This isn't about just, randomly attacking Black women or Black women with white collar positions, but really about framing and understanding as to why this happens. Where does this contempt come from, and how is it being leveraged in spaces over Black men in particular, often without cause, right? We're not talking about brothers that did something that, that warranted her to respond viciously, but often we're talking about brothers who, are just doing their jobs and can speak to. And I've been hearing this for the last few decades. This is new. I've been hearing this since the 1980s. Brothers talking about being unduly attacked by Black women and often, at least at that point, early on a few decades ago, they would come into a space thinking that there was some type of camaraderie on the basis of being Black, especially in spaces that were predominantly other than Black. And yet what they found is they received an undue amount of hostility, and there was no grounds for conversation, for dialogue. They had to immediately go on the defense and protect their jobs, protect themselves, and of course the people they're supporting. So these are the kind of stories I want you guys to come forward with, so that we can actually start to be able to frame this. And the other reason too is I don't want people thinking that it's just you. So that's the reality of some of this too. What I see brothers responding to most when they come in these spaces, the first thing I usually hear from them is that they thought it was just them. And they're finding out that that's far from the case. That these kinds of stories, these kinds of experiences are frequent, they're rampant, and they speak to something beyond just you as an individual. They speak to something on a social level, on a macro level, where we can talk about anti-Black misandry in a very casual context. Now, we can talk about it in the family, you know, like we brought up with Terrence Bud Crawford and his mother. We can talk about it in workspaces. We can talk about it in intimate relationships. We can talk about it in every area possible, because it's happening in every area. And in order for us to be able to articulate our concerns about it, we got to be able to talk about it first. So that said, appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys coming through. You know, give us your stories, give us your thoughts. Go ahead and put them in the comment section. I want to wish you guys a good night, and I will holler at y'all soon. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic and selfish and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.